The night is quiet. There is a softness in the air, like a thin layer of mist resting gently over the world. Somewhere far away, perhaps beyond a row of narrow houses, a clock ticks in a slow and steady rhythm. It does not rush. It does not call attention to itself. It simply continues, marking time in a calm and patient way. Now, imagine stepping back. Far back, into a different century. A place where the streets are dim, where the light comes not from electric bulbs, but from lamps and candles. A place where mornings arrive slowly, carried in on pale sunlight through small windows, and evenings settle early, wrapping the world in a gentle darkness. This is the world of Victorian England. And in this quiet world, there are children. They move softly through their days. Their footsteps are careful. Their voices are often low. Their lives are long in feeling, slow in rhythm, and sometimes, in ways that are hard to notice at first, a little bit cold. Not cold like winter wind, but quiet in the heart. Still. Reserved. Held back. If you were to stand in a narrow street in a small Victorian town, early in the morning, you might see a child walking beside an adult. The child's clothes are neat, but simple. The fabric is thick. It holds the shape of the body in a firm and proper way. The child does not run. They do not laugh loudly. They walk. Step by step. There is a kind of order to everything. In Victorian times, childhood was not always seen as a time for freedom or play. It was something quieter. Something more controlled. Children were often expected to behave like small adults, to learn discipline early, and to understand their place in the world without question. And so, their days followed patterns. Gentle, repeating patterns. Morning would begin early. In many homes, the first sound a child heard was not a parent's voice, but the faint movement of the household waking up. The rustle of fabric. The creak of wooden floors. The distant clink of dishes being prepared. In wealthier homes, a nurse or governess might enter the child's room. The room itself would be simple. A small bed. A wooden chair. Perhaps a small table with a book resting on it. The air inside might feel a little cool, especially in winter, when fires were carefully managed and warmth was never wasted. The governess would speak in a soft but firm voice. There was kindness, sometimes. But there was also distance. Children were not always hugged freely. They were not always comforted with open affection. Love existed, but it was often quiet, restrained, and shaped by rules. The child would rise. They would wash, dress, and prepare for the day, often with help, but always under instruction. Clothes had to be worn properly. Buttons fastened. Shoes clean. Hair neat. Everything had its place. Everything had its correct way. Breakfast was not loud. It was not a time of laughter or storytelling. Instead, it was calm. Controlled. Sometimes silent. A child might sit at a table, back straight, hands resting neatly. They would eat what was given. Bread. Perhaps porridge. Tea, though often weaker for children. There was no rushing. But there was also no lingering. After breakfast, the day moved into learning. Education was an important part of Victorian childhood, especially for those who could afford it. Lessons took place at home or in small schools. The rooms were quiet, filled with the soft sound of pages turning and the occasional scratch of pen on paper. The subjects were serious. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, sometimes. But not the kind of history that feels alive and full of stories. Instead, it was often memorized. Facts learned slowly, repeated again and again. The child would sit for long periods. Still. Focused. There was little room for distraction. If the child made a mistake, it was corrected. Not always harshly, but firmly. Discipline was a quiet force in their lives. Always present. Like the steady ticking of that distant clock. Outside, the world continued. You might hear the sound of a cart passing over uneven stones. The faint call of a vendor. The wind moving through narrow streets. But inside, the child remained at their desk. Time passed slowly. And in that slow passing of time, something else settled in. A kind of emotional stillness. Victorian society valued control. Control of behavior. Control of expression. Even control of feeling. Children learned early that emotions were not always to be shown. Tears might be discouraged. Loud joy might be quieted. Anger, especially, was to be hidden away. And so, the child learned to hold things inside. To keep their thoughts private. To sit with their feelings quietly, without letting them spill into the open. This did not mean they felt less. Only that they showed less. And over time, this created a kind of distance. Not just between children and adults. But sometimes, even within the child themselves. As the morning turned to afternoon, there might be a short time for rest or light activity. In some homes, children were allowed to play. But even play had its limits. It was often quiet. Structured. Simple. A doll carefully held. A book slowly read. A walk taken under supervision, along a path where everything was observed and proper. There were no loud games in the streets for many children. No wild running. No shouting. Especially not in the homes of the middle and upper classes, where reputation and appearance mattered deeply. Everything was watched. Everything was shaped. The child's world was safe in some ways. Predictable. Ordered. But it could also feel small. And quiet. Very quiet. As the day continued, lessons might return. Or tasks might be given. Small responsibilities. Simple duties. Things to teach discipline and purpose. The child would follow instructions. Step by step. Always aware that they were being guided. Always aware that they were expected to improve. To become something. Someone. Even from a young age. And as evening approached, the light would begin to fade. The sky would soften. Shadows would stretch gently across the ground. Inside the home, lamps would be lit. The glow would be warm, but dim. Dinner would be served. Again, calm. Again, controlled. Conversation, if it happened, was measured. Children spoke when spoken to. They listened more than they talked. They observed. They learned. And slowly, quietly, the day would come to an end. The child would return to their room. The same small space. The same simple bed. Perhaps a book. Perhaps a moment of silence before sleep. There might be thoughts. Feelings. Questions that were never spoken out loud. But they would rest there, quietly, like the soft ticking of that distant clock. And as sleep came, gently and without noise, the child would drift into dreams. Dreams that were their own. Unstructured. Free. A small space where the rules of the day no longer applied. And in that quiet, hidden place, something softer could exist. Something warmer. Something that did not need to be held back. The night deepens. The house grows still. And the rhythm of Victorian childhood continues. Slow. Orderly. And quietly, deeply, human. Morning returns slowly. Not all at once, but in soft layers. First, there is a faint gray light pressing gently against the window. Then, the quiet shapes of furniture begin to appear. The outline of a chair. The edge of a table. The still form of a small bed, where a child lies wrapped in blankets that have grown slightly cool during the night. The house is not yet awake. But it is no longer asleep. In this gentle in-between, there is a kind of stillness that feels almost endless. And then, as before, the day begins. Not with sudden noise, but with small, careful movements. A door opens somewhere down the hallway. A footstep passes slowly across the floor. The faint sound of fabric brushing against wood. For a Victorian child, waking is not a moment of excitement. It is a quiet return to routine. The child opens their eyes. They do not rush to sit up. They do not call out. Instead, they lie still for a moment, listening, sensing the shape of the day before it fully begins. Then, gently, they rise. The air in the room may feel cold, especially in the early hours. Fires are not always kept burning through the night. Warmth is something that must be managed, not taken for granted. The child dresses. Each movement is deliberate. There is a correct way to put on each piece of clothing. Sleeves adjusted. Buttons fastened in order. Shoes tied neatly. Even at a young age, the expectation of neatness is strong. Clothing is not just for comfort. It is a sign. A reflection of discipline. Of family. Of place in the world. And so, the child learns to wear it carefully, as if it carries meaning beyond the fabric itself. Soon, the door opens. A governess, or perhaps a nurse, steps inside. Her presence is calm, but structured. Her voice is low, but carries instruction. She may ask if the child slept well. She may smooth the child's hair or adjust a collar. There is care in these gestures. But it is measured. Gentle, yet distant. The kind of care that does not linger too long. Together, they move into the next part of the day. Breakfast. The room where meals are taken is quiet in the early hours. Light filters in slowly through tall windows, touching the surface of the table, the backs of chairs, the polished edges of simple dishes. The child takes their seat. Back straight. Hands still. They wait. Food is placed before them. It is plain, but sufficient. Bread, perhaps slightly firm at the edges. A small portion of porridge, warm but not overly rich. Tea, mild and carefully poured. There is no rush. But there is also no delay. Eating is something to be done properly. Not something to be enjoyed loudly. The child takes small bites. They do not speak unless spoken to. If an adult is present, their presence fills the room in a quiet way. Authority does not need to raise its voice. It simply exists, steady and understood. And so, the meal passes. Like many moments in a Victorian child's day, it is calm. Orderly. Almost silent. After breakfast, the structure becomes firmer. Lessons begin again. The learning room may be the same as the day before. A small space, filled with books and simple furniture. A desk placed near a window. Shelves lined with volumes that hold knowledge, carefully bound and rarely touched with carelessness. The child sits. The governess stands nearby. Or sits, watching. There is a book open. Words printed in neat lines. The child reads. Slowly. Carefully. Each word is spoken with attention. Pronunciation matters. Clarity matters. Mistakes are corrected, not harshly, but without softness. Again. Try again. The rhythm of learning is steady. Repetition is common. Understanding comes not through excitement, but through quiet persistence. Writing follows. Ink and pen. The scratch of the nib against paper creates a soft, repeating sound. Letters are formed one by one. Each must be shaped correctly. Each line must be straight. There is no rushing. Time stretches gently across the morning. And in this stretching, the child learns patience. They learn stillness. They learn how to sit with a task until it is complete. Outside, the world continues its slow movement. Perhaps a light rain begins to fall. Soft drops touching the window. A faint tapping sound, steady and soothing. The child may notice it. For a moment, their thoughts drift. But only for a moment. Because attention must return to the lesson. Always returning. Always guided back. Arithmetic may come next. Numbers written carefully. Simple problems repeated. The child learns not just the answers, but the process. Step by step. There is a comfort in this repetition. A quiet certainty. Things are known. Things are correct. And there is little room for uncertainty. This, too, shapes the mind. Shapes the way the child sees the world. As something that can be ordered. Understood. Controlled. But feelings do not always follow such patterns. And so, those remain quiet. Unspoken. Held gently beneath the surface. As the morning fades into afternoon, there may be a pause. Not a break filled with excitement. But a slowing. A moment to step away from the desk. The child might walk. Perhaps in a garden. Perhaps along a narrow path. Always under watch. Always within boundaries. The air outside feels different. Fresh. Open. There is space to breathe. Birds may move softly between branches. Leaves may shift gently in the breeze. The world, in these moments, feels wider. But even here, there is structure. The child does not wander freely. They walk where they are told. They observe quietly. Hands often folded. Posture maintained. Even in nature, discipline remains. Still, something soft exists in these moments. A quiet connection to the world beyond walls. A feeling that is not taught, but simply felt. And then, gently, the child is called back inside. The day continues. Afternoon lessons may be lighter. Reading stories, perhaps. Though even stories are chosen with care. They teach morals. Lessons. Proper behavior. Everything has purpose. Everything has direction. Time moves slowly. The ticking clock continues its steady rhythm. And as the light begins to fade once more, the house shifts toward evening. There is a calm that settles again. Familiar. Repetitive. Safe, in its own quiet way. Dinner comes. The same careful setting. The same measured behavior. The child sits. listens, responds when required. Their voice is soft, their presence controlled. After the meal, there may be a short period of quiet activity. A book, a simple task, something to fill the time without disturbing the calm. And then, the day begins to close. The child returns to their room. The space is unchanged, still, orderly. The bed waits. The blankets slightly cool again. There may be a moment at the window, looking out into the dim evening. The sky now darker, the world quieter. And in this quiet, thoughts may come. Soft, unspoken. Feelings that have no place during the structured hours of the day. They are not loud. They do not demand attention. But they are there. Gentle. Persistent. A quiet part of being human. Soon, the light is lowered. The room dims. The child lies down. Closes their eyes. And once again, sleep arrives slowly. Without sound. Without urgency. Just a soft drifting away. And the rhythm continues. Day after day. Slow. Orderly. Quiet. And somewhere within it, a child learning not just how to live, but how to feel, quietly, in a world that rarely asks them to speak. The days continue in their quiet pattern. One morning blending gently into the next, like soft layers of light spreading across a pale sky. Nothing feels sudden. Nothing feels rushed. Even change, when it comes, arrives slowly, almost unnoticed. For a Victorian child, time does not leap forward. It drifts. And within that drifting, something subtle begins to take shape. Not just routine, but habit of feeling. Or perhaps, habit of not showing feeling. As another morning begins, the child wakes again in that same quiet room. The air is still, holding the faint scent of fabric and wood. The walls do not speak, but they seem to remember each day that has passed within them. The child rises, dresses, moves through each small action with growing familiarity. There is comfort in knowing what comes next. Even if that comfort is quiet. Even if it feels, at times, a little empty. Because in a world so carefully structured, there is little room for surprise. And without surprise, emotions settle into stillness. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels awake now. Not noisy, but alive in a restrained way. Movement is present, but controlled. Voices exist, but softened. The day unfolds again. But today, we move a little deeper. Beyond routine. Into the spaces between actions. Into the quiet emotional world that often goes unseen. Victorian society placed great importance on self-control. Not just in behavior, but in feeling. Children were taught, gently but firmly, that strong emotions were something to manage, not something to display. Crying, for example, was not always welcomed. A child who cried too easily might be told to compose themselves. To be strong. To be calm. And so, even from a young age, the child begins to learn how to pause their feelings. To hold them back. The night not is quiet, to deny them completely, a soft stillness rests over the rooftops and narrow like street. Water in a still pond, rather than a rushing stream. This does not happen all at once. It is learned slowly. Through small moments. A fall that does not lead to comfort, but to instruction. A disappointment that is met not with sympathy, but with quiet redirection. It is not so bad. You must carry on. Be brave. These words are not harsh, They are not spoken in anger, but they shape something deep inside. The child begins to understand that emotions are private, something to be felt quietly, something to be handled alone. And over time, this creates a kind of distance, not just from others, but from expression itself. As lessons begin again, the child sits at their desk. But today, perhaps, their mind drifts just a little longer. Not because they are disobedient, but because they are human. Because somewhere inside, there are thoughts that do not fit neatly into lines of writing or columns of numbers. Perhaps they think of a memory, a moment from a walk, the sound of birds in the garden, the feeling of wind against their face. Simple things, but meaningful. And yet, these thoughts remain unspoken, because the structure of the day does not make space for them. The governess notices the pause. A gentle reminder is given. Attention returns. The lesson continues. And once again, the child settles into stillness. There is a quiet skill in this. The ability to return, to focus, to set aside what is not required in the moment. It is a skill that will stay with them long after childhood ends. Outside, the weather shifts. Perhaps the sky grows heavy with clouds. A soft gray pressing down over rooftops and narrow streets. Rain begins again, light at first, then steady. The sound reaches the window. A soft rhythm, almost like breathing. The child hears it, feels it, even. There is something calming in that sound. Something that does not ask anything in return. Unlike lessons, unlike expectations, the rain simply falls. And for a brief moment, the child exists within that sound. Not thinking of right or wrong. Not thinking of duty. Just listening. Just being. But again, only for a moment. Because the world inside the room calls them back. And so, the day moves forward. As afternoon approaches, there may be interaction with other children. Siblings, perhaps. But even these relationships are shaped by the same quiet rules. Play is not wild. It is not loud. It is careful. Measured. A shared activity rather than an explosion of energy. Two children might sit together. One holding a doll. The other turning the pages of a book. They speak softly. If they speak at all. There is companionship. But it is gentle. Reserved. There are no sudden bursts of laughter echoing through the halls. No running footsteps that shake the floor. Everything remains contained. And within that containment, children learn something else. How to be alone, even when they are not alone. How to exist beside others without fully opening. It is not loneliness. Not exactly. But it is a kind of quiet separation. A space that is always there. Invisible, but present. As the afternoon fades, the child may once again step outside. The rain has stopped now. The ground is damp. The air smells fresh, touched by water and earth. There is a softness in the light. Clouds breaking just enough to let a pale glow pass through. The child walks slowly. Shoes touching the damp path. Each step careful. The world feels calm. Unhurried. And in this calm, something inside the child may begin to soften. Because outside, there are fewer rules. Fewer eyes watching every movement. Even if only slightly. They may pause. Look at a leaf. Watch how a drop of water falls from its edge. Simple things. Small details. But these moments matter. They are quiet spaces where feeling is allowed to exist without correction, without instruction, without being shaped. And then, as always, the moment passes. The child returns indoors. Evening approaches. The familiar pattern resumes. Dinner. Silence. Soft conversation. Then quiet time. Then bed. But now, as the child lies in that still room once more, something lingers. Not something loud. Not something clear. But a feeling. Difficult to name. A mixture of calm and distance. Of safety and restraint. Of being cared for, but not always held. And as sleep comes, the child drifts again into that private world. Dreams that are freer. Less structured. Where emotions can move more easily. Where laughter might be louder. Where tears might fall without being stopped. And then, morning will return. The same. And yet, not entirely the same. Because each day adds something. A layer. A quiet shaping of the self. Until, slowly, over many days, many seasons, many silent lessons, the child becomes someone who understands the world as orderly, quiet, and gently distant. The rhythm of days continues. So steady that it begins to feel like a quiet tide, moving in and out without ever making a sound. Morning arrives. Evening fades. And in between, the life of a Victorian child unfolds in careful, measured steps. But now, slowly, we begin to notice something else. Not just what the child does, but what the child is becoming. Because childhood, in this world, is not only about growing older. It is about being shaped. Gently. Constantly. Almost invisibly. As another morning settles over the house, the child wakes with a sense of familiarity so deep it no longer feels new. The room is the same. The air is the same. Even the light, pale and soft through the window, feels like something that has happened many times before. There is comfort in this. A quiet kind of safety. But there is also something else. A stillness that does not change. The child dresses again, each movement now almost automatic. Fingers fasten buttons without hesitation. Shoes are tied with practiced care. Hair is smoothed into place. There is no need to think about these things anymore. The body has learned. And so has the mind. Habits have settled in, like soft dust resting on surfaces. Not heavy. Not noticeable at first. But always there. As the child steps into the hallway, the house greets them in the same quiet way. The sounds are familiar. The pacing of the morning is unchanged. Breakfast comes and goes. Lessons begin. But today, we look more closely at something deeper. Expectation. Victorian childhood is filled with it. Not loud expectations. Not spoken again and again. But quiet ones. Always present. Children are expected to behave well. To listen. To learn. To grow into proper adults. And this expectation is not something they can step away from. It surrounds them. Like the walls of the home. Like the structure of the day. Always there. The child feels it, even when no one speaks. In the way they sit. In the way they hold their hands still. In the way they choose not to speak certain thoughts out loud. And over time, this expectation becomes part of them. Something they carry inside. As lessons continue, the child reads again. Words forming softly in the air. But now, there is less hesitation, less wandering of the mind. Not because curiosity has disappeared, but because it has learned where it is allowed to go, and where it must remain quiet. This is how discipline settles in. Not through force, but through repetition, through gentle correction, through the steady rhythm of days that rarely change. The governess watches, not closely in a harsh way, but carefully, always aware. There is a quiet balance between guidance and distance. She teaches, she corrects, but she does not always comfort. And so, the child learns something important. That approval comes from doing things correctly, from meeting expectations, from being calm, from being controlled. And so, the child tries. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, again and again, to be what is expected. Outside, the sky is clear today. Sunlight rests gently on rooftops and narrow streets. It moves slowly, shifting across windows and walls, bringing a soft warmth that never becomes overwhelming. The child notices it as they sit near the window. A small patch of light touches the desk. It feels warm against their hand. For a moment, they pause. Not in distraction, but in awareness. There is something simple in that warmth. Something that does not require effort, does not require correctness, just exists. Moments like this are small, but they matter. They are quiet reminders that not everything must be controlled, that some parts of the world simply are. But these moments pass quickly, because the structure of the day continues. Always continuing. As afternoon arrives, the child may be given small responsibilities. Tasks that are not difficult, but meaningful. Folding items carefully. Arranging objects in order. Carrying something from one room to another without dropping it. These tasks are lessons in themselves. Not about skill, but about care. About attention. About doing things properly, even when they are small. The child completes them quietly. There is no praise spoken loudly. No celebration. But there may be a nod. A simple acknowledgement. And that is enough. Because in this world, approval is quiet. And so, the child learns to value it, even in its smallest form. As the day continues, we begin to see how emotional distance takes shape. Not as something sudden, but as something gradual. Built from many small moments. Moments where feeling is softened. Where expression is guided. Where silence is chosen over sound. The child does not stop feeling, but they learn how to hold those feelings in a quiet space. A space that belongs only to them. Sometimes, this space feels calm, like a still room with soft light. Other times, it feels empty, like something is missing, but cannot be named. This is the quiet complexity of Victorian childhood. It is not harsh in obvious ways. It is not filled with loud difficulty. But it is deeply structured. And within that structure, emotion becomes something careful. Something measured. As evening approaches once more, the familiar pattern returns. Dinner. Stillness. Soft voices. The child listens more than they speak. They watch. They learn. And slowly, they become very good at understanding what is expected without being told. This is a kind of intelligence. A quiet awareness. The ability to read a room. To sense when to speak. When to remain silent. When to move. When to stay still. And this awareness grows stronger each day. As night settles over the house, the light fades again. Lamps are dimmed. The world becomes softer, quieter. The child returns to their room. That same small space. But now, it feels slightly different. Not because it has changed, but because the child has. Even if only a little. They sit for a moment before lying down. Hands resting in their lap. Eyes moving slowly across the room. There are no loud thoughts. No clear questions. Just a quiet sense of being. Of existing within a world that is steady. Predictable. And sometimes, a little distant. When they lie down, the bed feels familiar. The blankets settle around them. The room holds them in stillness. And as sleep begins to come, gently and without resistance, the child drifts once more into that private place. A place where the rules of the day loosen. Where feelings move more freely. Where the self is not shaped by expectation, but simply allowed to be. And in that quiet space, something soft remains. Something that has always been there. Even in the most structured days. Even in the quietest moments. A small, steady warmth. Waiting. Patient. Unspoken. As the night deepens, the house grows still again. The ticking of time continues. And the long, quiet story of Victorian childhood moves forward. Slowly. Gently. Almost without sound. Time moves forward. Not in sharp steps, but in soft layers, like pages turning without sound. Days pass, one after another, each carrying the same quiet rhythm, the same careful structure. And within this steady flow, the child continues to grow. But growth here is not loud. It does not arrive with sudden change. It happens quietly. Almost invisibly. As the next morning begins, the child wakes with less hesitation than before. The space between sleep and waking has become familiar. There is no confusion, no rush to understand the day. The pattern is already known. The room feels the same. Still. Ordered. The air carries that same faint coolness, touched by fabric and wood. Light presses softly through the window, not bright, but enough to shape the edges of the world. The child rises. This time, there is no pause. No moment of still listening. Movement begins almost at once. Not out of urgency, but out of habit. Clothing is put on with quiet efficiency. Fingers move without needing guidance. The body remembers what to do. And this is how routine settles deeply into a life. Not as something forced, but as something that becomes natural. As something that no longer feels separate from the self. When the child steps into the hallway, there is a sense of continuity. Nothing surprises. Nothing interrupts the flow. The house exists as it always does, calm and controlled. Breakfast comes again. The same table. The same careful posture. The same quiet presence of others. But now, something has changed in a subtle way. The child no longer waits uncertainly. They know how to sit. How to hold their hands. How to eat without being reminded. Instruction is no longer needed in the same way. Because it has already been learned. And with this learning comes something deeper. A quiet internal voice. Not spoken aloud. But always present. Guiding behavior. Correcting small actions. Keeping everything within the boundaries that have been set. This is how expectation becomes part of the child. No longer something outside. But something within. After breakfast, lessons begin once more. But now, the child approaches them with a different feeling. Not resistance. Not even simple obedience. But acceptance. A calm understanding that this is what the day holds. The book is opened. Words are read. But now, the reading flows more easily. Less hesitation. Less correction. The governess watches, but speaks less. Because there is less need to guide each step. The child has learned how to guide themselves. And this self-guidance brings a kind of quiet independence. Not the independence of freedom, but the independence of discipline. The ability to move through tasks without constant direction. The ability to remain still, focused, and correct. This is valued deeply in Victorian life. And so, the child grows into it. Slowly. Steadily. Writing follows. The pen moves across paper with greater confidence. Lines are straighter. Letters are more even. There is a sense of improvement. But it is not celebrated loudly. It is simply expected. Progress is not something to be praised again and again. It is something to be maintained. And so, the child continues. Always continuing. Outside, the world shifts gently with the season. Perhaps now, there is a soft warmth in the air. The kind that settles lightly on the skin without becoming overwhelming. Leaves move quietly in the breeze. Light rests longer on the ground. The child notices these things. Not in a way that interrupts the day. But in a quiet, passing awareness. A glance through the window. A moment of stillness. These small observations become part of the child's inner world. A place where feeling exists without needing to be expressed. As the morning fades into afternoon, there is again a short period of rest. But even rest has a shape. The child does not run freely. Does not lose themselves in unstructured time. Instead, they move gently into quieter activities. Perhaps they sit with a book. Turning pages slowly. Not rushing to reach the end. Reading as something steady. Something calm. Or perhaps they sit near a window. Watching the outside world in silence. There is something deeply peaceful in these moments. But also something solitary. Because while the child is not alone in the house, they are often alone within themselves. Not in sadness, but in quiet separation. A space where thoughts remain unshared. Where feelings remain contained. This is the emotional landscape of Victorian childhood. Not empty, but reserved. Not cold in the sense of absence, but cool in the sense of distance. As afternoon continues, there may be interaction with an adult beyond lessons. A parent, perhaps. But even here, the tone remains measured. Affection exists. But it is subtle. A gentle touch on the shoulder. A brief word of approval. A small nod. There are no long embraces. No open displays of warmth that fill the room. Love is present. But it moves quietly. Almost like something understood rather than shown. The child accepts this. Because it is all they have known. And so, they do not question it. They do not expect more. They simply receive what is given. And in doing so, they learn to mirror it. To express themselves in the same restrained way. As evening approaches once again, the familiar pattern returns. Dinner is prepared. The table is set. The child takes their place without being told. There is a sense now that everything is known in advance. Every movement. Every moment. The conversation, if it happens, is soft and limited. The child answers questions politely. Does not speak out of turn. Listens carefully. There is a quiet grace in this behavior. Something calm and composed. But beneath it, there remains that inner space. Unspoken. Unseen. After the meal, the house grows quieter. The light fades. The day begins to close. The child returns to their room. This time, they move without pause. They know what comes next. They prepare for sleep with the same steady rhythm. And then, they sit for a moment. Not because they are told to, but because something inside them asks for stillness. Their hands rest gently. Their breathing slows. And in that quiet moment, there is a feeling. Not strong. Not overwhelming. But present. A soft awareness of self. Of being a small part of a larger world. A world that is ordered. Predictable. And sometimes distant. Then, slowly, they lie down. The bed receives them. The blankets settle. The room dims. And once again, sleep comes gently. Without sound. Without resistance. And as the child drifts into dreams, the structure of the day fades away. Leaving behind only the quiet essence of who they are becoming. A child shaped by routine. By expectation. By silence. And by a world that teaches them, day by day, how to live carefully. How to feel quietly. And how to carry both within a calm, steady heart. The passing of time becomes softer now. Less noticeable. Days no longer feel separate from one another. Instead, they blend together, like gentle waves that reach the shore and return again, always the same, yet never entirely identical. For the Victorian child, this blending creates a sense of quiet continuity. A life that does not rush forward, but unfolds slowly. Almost endlessly. As another morning arrives, there is no surprise in waking. The child opens their eyes, and the world is exactly as expected. The same room. The same stillness. The same faint light resting against the window. There is comfort in the sameness. A quiet assurance that nothing will suddenly change. But there is also a certain stillness that settles deeper with each passing day. The child rises, already moving within the rhythm before fully thinking about it. Dressing happens without pause. The body knows each motion. There is no need to be reminded. No need to hesitate. Even the smallest details have become familiar. And this familiarity begins to shape something deeper. Not just behavior, but identity. The child is no longer simply following rules. They are becoming someone who lives by them. Breakfast comes and goes, as it always does. The table is quiet. The movements are careful. But now, something subtle has shifted. The silence no longer feels imposed. It feels natural. The child no longer wonders if they should speak. They already know when to remain quiet. And so, silence becomes a part of them. Not empty, but steady. After the meal, lessons begin again. But now, the child's attention holds more firmly. There is less drifting. Less quiet wandering of thought. Not because imagination has disappeared, but because it has learned where it belongs. And where it does not. The governess speaks less now. Her role changes slightly. From guiding each step, to observing what has already been learned. There is a quiet trust forming. Not spoken aloud, but present. The child reads with greater ease. Words flow without interruption. Writing becomes smoother. Numbers are understood without needing repetition. And in this steady improvement, something else grows. A quiet pride. But even pride is felt gently. It is not shown outwardly. It is held inside. A small, warm feeling that does not need to be shared. Because in this world, feelings often remain within. Outside, the day is calm. The sky stretches pale and wide. There is a stillness in the air, broken only by small, distant sounds. A cart moving slowly. A door closing somewhere far away. The quiet life of the street continuing without urgency. The child notices these things, but does not speak of them. Observation becomes another quiet habit. To see. To understand. Without always expressing. As midday approaches, there is a pause again. A soft break in the rhythm. But even now, the child does not seek noise or excitement. They move toward stillness naturally. Perhaps they sit with a book. Or simply rest their hands and look out the window. There is a calm acceptance of quiet. It no longer feels like something given. It feels like something chosen. And in this choice, the child becomes even more settled within themselves. But within that calm, there is still something deeper. Something not always clear. A feeling that moves softly beneath the surface. Sometimes it is contentment. A gentle ease. Other times, it is something harder to name. A sense of distance. A quiet space between what is felt and what is shown. The child may not understand this. They may not think about it directly. But it exists. Like a soft echo. Always present, even when unnoticed. As afternoon returns, interaction with others continues. But as before, it remains gentle. Controlled. Children sit together, not with loud excitement, but with quiet companionship. They share space more than they share words. And in this shared quiet, relationships form differently. Not through constant expression, but through presence. Through simply being near one another. It is a calm kind of connection, but also a reserved one. As the hours pass, the child moves through small tasks again. Folding. Arranging. Carrying. Each task completed carefully. Not because someone is always watching, but because the child has learned to watch themselves. This is one of the quietest changes of all. The shift from being guided to guiding oneself. From being corrected to correcting internally. And this internal structure becomes very strong, very steady. It will remain long after childhood fades. As evening approaches, the house settles again. The same gentle dimming of light. The same quiet preparation for the end of the day. Dinner arrives. The child sits. Listens. Speaks when needed. But there is a deeper calm now. A sense that everything is known. Nothing unexpected. Nothing uncertain. And this predictability creates a kind of peace. But also a quiet narrowing of experience. Because when everything is known, there is little space for the unknown. And the unknown is often where emotion moves most freely. After the meal, the house grows quieter still. The child returns to their room. This space has become more than just a place to sleep. It is a private world. A place where the child can exist without constant observation. Even if only for a short time. They may sit by the window. The outside world now dim. Shadows stretching softly. A faint light still resting at the edge of the sky. There is something peaceful here. something that feels slightly more open than the structured hours of the day. And in this space, thoughts may come more freely. Not loud thoughts, not urgent ones, but gentle reflections. Moments remembered. Feelings sensed. Not fully understood, but present. This is where the emotional life of the child lives most clearly. Not in the busy hours of lessons. Not in the careful moments of meals. But here. In the quiet. In the stillness. In the space where no one is watching closely. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The routine is familiar. Almost comforting in its repetition. They lie down. The bed feels the same. The room holds its quiet shape. And as their eyes close, the structure of the day begins to fade once more. Sleep arrives gently. Without interruption. And in sleep, something soft opens again. A space where the child is not required to be proper. Not required to be controlled. A space where emotion moves more freely. Where the inner self is not shaped by expectation, but simply exists. And so, night after night, this quiet cycle continues. Day shaping behavior. Night holding feeling. And between the two, a child growing slowly into someone who understands the world as steady, calm, and quietly restrained. Seasons begin to change. Not quickly, and not in ways that feel sudden, but in small, almost unnoticeable shifts. The air carries a slightly different feeling. The light rests at a new angle. The mornings arrive either a little earlier, or a little later, depending on the slow turning of the year. For a Victorian child, these changes are observed quietly. They are not marked with excitement. They are simply noticed. And then accepted. As another morning begins, the child wakes once more in that same familiar room. But something in the air feels cooler now. The kind of coolness that lingers just a little longer against the skin. The blankets feel heavier. The floor beneath their feet a little colder. And so, the day begins again. But now, within a slightly different season. The child dresses as always, but the clothing may be thicker. Layers added carefully. Fabric chosen not for style, but for warmth and propriety. Each piece still placed with care. Each movement still controlled. Routine does not change with the seasons. It remains steady. Only the surroundings shift gently around it. As the child steps into the hallway, the house carries a quieter tone. Windows may remain closed longer. The air inside feels still, held close within the walls. Breakfast comes again. Warm food is placed carefully on the table. The steam rising softly into the cool air. The child sits, eats, moves through the moment with the same calm precision. But now, the warmth of the meal feels more noticeable. A small comfort. A quiet contrast to the chill of the morning. And yet, even comfort is experienced gently. Not expressed outwardly. Just felt. And then set aside as the day continues. Lessons begin. The room feels slightly dimmer. The light outside softer, filtered through clouds or shorter days. Candles or lamps may be used more often now. Their glow is steady. Warm. But never bright enough to disturb the calm. The child reads. Writes. Learns. But something about the season brings a deeper stillness. The outside world grows quieter. Fewer distant sounds. Less movement in the streets. And this quiet settles into the learning space. Making everything feel slower. Heavier. Not in a burdensome way. but in a way that deepens the sense of time passing gently. The governess speaks in the same tone. Calm. Measured. Unchanging. Her presence remains a steady guide. A constant in a world where even the seasons move softly. As the morning stretches on, the child's attention remains steady. But now, there is more time spent in quiet observation. Looking at the way light moves across the desk. Noticing the faint flicker of a candle flame. Listening to the soft sound of pages turning. These details become more present. Because there is little else to interrupt them. And so, the child's world becomes even more internal. Even more focused on small, quiet experiences. As midday approaches, the outside air may carry a faint scent. Damp earth. Falling leaves. Or the crispness of colder days. If the child steps outside, they notice it immediately. The air feels different. Sharper. More defined. Their breath may be visible in soft clouds. Their steps slower on the ground. There is something deeply calming about this. A stillness that feels almost complete. But even here, structure remains. The walk is not long. The path is known. There is no wandering beyond what is allowed. And yet, these moments outside feel slightly more open than the rest of the day. The child may pause. Look at a tree. Notice how its leaves have changed. Or how some have fallen. Resting quietly on the ground. There is a quiet beauty in this. But it is not spoken. Not shared. Just held within. As the child returns indoors, the warmth of the house feels more noticeable. A soft contrast to the outside air. And again, this warmth becomes another small, quiet comfort. Afternoon continues. Lessons may be shorter now. Light fading earlier. The day closing sooner. The child moves through tasks with the same care. The same attention to detail. But the rhythm feels slightly slower. More drawn out. As if the season itself is encouraging stillness. Encouraging quiet. Interaction with others remains gentle. Controlled. Even in shared spaces, there is a sense of calm that deepens with the shorter days. Voices remain low. Movements remain careful. The world does not rush. And so, neither does the child. As evening approaches, darkness arrives earlier. The sky dims quickly. Shadows stretch across the room. Lamps are lit sooner. Their glow becoming the center of the space. Dinner feels warmer now. Not in sound, but in feeling. The contrast between cold and warmth is more present. The child notices it. Even if they do not express it. Food provides comfort. But it is quiet comfort. Experienced inwardly. After the meal, the house grows still very quickly. There is less time between evening and night. The transition is soft, but noticeable. The child returns to their room earlier. The outside world already dark. Windows reflecting only faint shapes. Inside, the room feels enclosed. Safe. But also separate from everything beyond its walls. The child sits for a moment. Perhaps longer than before. Because the night has arrived sooner. And there is more time in this quiet space. Thoughts come gently. Not as questions. But as feelings. A sense of calm. A sense of distance. A quiet awareness of being part of something steady and unchanging. And yet, somewhere deeper, there is also a softness. A quiet longing for something less defined. Something more open. But this feeling remains faint. not strong enough to disturb the calm, just present enough to exist. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The routine unchanged. The same careful movements. The same quiet preparation. They lie down. The blankets feel warmer now. Heavier. The room holds its stillness. And as their eyes close, the world fades gently away once more. Sleep comes. Soft. Uninterrupted. And within sleep, the child enters that familiar private space, where structure loosens, where emotion moves freely, where the quiet boundaries of the day soften. And so, even as the seasons change, the deeper rhythm remains. Day shaping behavior, night holding feeling, and between them, a childhood that moves slowly, quietly, and with a calm, steady distance that settles deeper with time. As the quieter season settles more deeply, the days grow shorter still. Morning arrives later now. The light takes its time, as if it, too, moves more slowly in this world. When the child wakes, the room is dimmer than before. Shadows linger in the corners. The shapes of familiar objects take a little longer to fully appear. There is no rush to brighten the space. Instead, the day begins gently within this dimness. The child rises from bed, feeling the cool air more sharply now. The floor beneath their feet holds the night's chill. Clothing is put on carefully, layer by layer, each piece adding a small measure of warmth. The act of dressing feels slightly longer. Not because it is difficult, but because each step is felt more clearly. The body notices the cold. The hands pause just a moment before moving again. And still, the rhythm remains calm, unchanged. As the child steps into the hallway, the house is quieter than usual. Sounds feel softer, as if absorbed by the thicker air. Even footsteps seem more gentle, less distinct. Breakfast is waiting. The table set as always. But now, the warmth of the food feels more important. Steam rises slowly from a bowl. The child sits and eats in silence, but there is a quiet comfort in the warmth that spreads through them. It is not spoken, not shared, but deeply felt. And then, as always, the moment passes. Lessons begin again. But now, the room depends more on candlelight or lamps. The glow is steady, casting soft shadows that move slightly as the flame flickers. The child reads in this warm, dim light. The words feel slower. The space more enclosed. There is a sense of being held within the room, separated gently from the outside world. Writing continues. The pen moves across the page. The sound is softer now, blending into the quiet of the room. There is something almost peaceful in this repetition. The same motions. The same careful attention. Again and again. The governess remains nearby, her presence calm and unchanged. Her voice carries softly, guiding when needed, but often allowing the child to move forward alone. This quiet independence grows stronger each day. The child no longer waits for constant instruction. They understand the pattern. They follow it naturally. And in doing so, they become even more still. More controlled. More inward. Outside, the world feels distant. The windows show only a pale, muted light. Perhaps a thin fog rests over the street. Perhaps the sky remains heavy with clouds. There is little movement. Little sound. The outside world seems quieter than ever. And this quiet presses gently inward, filling the spaces of the house. As midday approaches, the child may step outside briefly. The air is cold now. Clear in a way that feels almost sharp. Each breath is noticeable. Each step on the ground makes a soft, distinct sound. The child walks slowly, carefully. The world around them feels still. Trees stand bare or nearly so. The ground may hold traces of dampness or fallen leaves. There is beauty here. But it is quiet beauty. Not bright. Not overwhelming. Just present. The child may pause for a moment, looking at something simple. A branch. A patch of ground. A small movement in the distance. And in that pause, there is a feeling. A deeper stillness than before. As if the world itself has slowed to match the quiet rhythm of their life. Then, gently, they return indoors. The warmth of the house greets them again. Subtle, but noticeable. The shift from cold to warm becomes one of the few changes that can be clearly felt. Afternoon continues. Lessons may shorten as the light fades earlier. There is less time for activity. More time for stillness. The child sits quietly, reading, or simply resting. There is no need to fill every moment. Silence itself becomes something familiar. Something almost comforting. Interaction with others remains the same. Soft. Measured. Voices never rise. Laughter, if it comes, is gentle and brief. Even joy is expressed quietly. As if it, too, must remain within certain boundaries. And so, the emotional world of the child continues to take shape. Not through large events, but through these small, repeated patterns. Moments where feeling is present, but controlled. Moments where expression is softened. Moments where silence is chosen again and again. As evening arrives, darkness comes quickly. The sky fades into deep shadow. Windows reflect only the faint glow of lamps inside. The outside world disappears into stillness. Dinner is served earlier now. The room feels warmer, more enclosed. The child sits as always. Eats carefully. Listens. Speaks only when needed. The rhythm does not change. Even as the world outside grows colder and darker. After the meal, there is little time before night fully settles. The house quiets quickly. Each room holding its own small pool of light. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly behind them. Inside, the space feels still. Almost untouched by time. The same bed. The same chair. The same small table. Everything in its place. They may sit for a moment. Longer than before. Because the night stretches out quietly ahead. There is no noise to interrupt thought. No movement to draw attention away. And so, the inner world becomes clearer. More present. Thoughts move gently. Feelings rise softly. Not overwhelming. But steady. A sense of calm. A sense of distance. A sense of being held within a life that is structured and certain. And yet, within that certainty, there remains a quiet question. Not spoken. Not fully formed. Just a soft awareness that something beyond this structure exists. Something wider. Something less defined. But it remains out of reach. And so, the child rests within what is known. Within the calm. Within the quiet. Eventually, they prepare for sleep. The routine unchanged. The same careful movements. The same soft dimming of light. They lie down. The blankets warm. The room still. And as sleep comes once more, gently and without resistance, the child drifts into that familiar place beyond structure. A place where the boundaries soften. Where feeling moves more freely. Where the quiet distance of the day fades into something softer. And so, night holds what day cannot. And day shapes what night releases. And between them, the child continues to grow. Slowly. Quietly. Within a world that teaches stillness not as a rule, but as a way of being. The days continue to shorten. Morning arrives gently, but later than before, as if the sun itself is in no hurry to begin. The child wakes within a deeper dimness now. The room holds the last traces of night, and for a few quiet moments, it feels as though time has paused. There is no sound at first. Only stillness. Then, slowly, the world returns. A faint movement in the house. A distant step. The quiet beginning of another day. The child opens their eyes and remains still for a moment. Not out of reluctance, but out of habit. A quiet awareness settles in before movement begins. Then, as always, they rise. The air is cool again. Perhaps colder than yesterday. The child dresses with care, layering each piece of clothing slowly, feeling the texture of the fabric, the gentle weight of it resting against their body. There is no rush. There is never a rush. Time moves differently here. Slower. More evenly. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels wrapped in quiet. The walls seem to hold the warmth inside, keeping the cold just beyond reach. Breakfast waits. The same table. The same careful arrangement. But now, the light is softer still, and the glow of a lamp may remain even as the morning begins. The child sits. Back straight. Hands still. The routine is no longer something to follow. It is something they are part of. Eating is quiet. Measured. Each movement calm. The warmth of the food spreads slowly, offering a gentle comfort against the chill of the morning. There is something soothing in this contrast. Something steady. Something reliable. After the meal, lessons begin once more. The learning room feels more enclosed now. The outside world has faded further into stillness, leaving the inside space to feel almost separate from everything beyond it. The child sits at the desk. The book opens. And the day's learning continues. But now, there is a deeper quiet in the child's mind. Less wandering. Less drifting. Not because thought has disappeared, but because it has settled. Like dust that no longer moves. Reading flows gently. Words pass from page to voice without interruption. Writing follows. The pen moves steadily. Lines form with care. There is a rhythm here. A quiet, repeating pattern that brings a sense of calm. The governess watches, but rarely needs to speak. The child knows what to do. And does it? This quiet independence has become part of them. Something natural. Something expected. Outside, the world remains still. Perhaps a light frost has settled over the ground. Perhaps the sky is pale and distant. There is little movement. Little sound. The world feels as though it is resting. And this rest reflects inward, making the child's environment feel even more calm, even more contained. As midday approaches, there may be a short walk. The child steps outside, and the air meets them with a gentle sharpness. Each breath feels clear. Each step on the ground carries a soft sound. The world is quiet. Not empty. But still. Trees stand without movement. The sky stretches above, pale and wide. there is a quiet beauty in the stillness. A kind of peacefulness that asks nothing. The child walks slowly. Hands often still. Posture maintained. But inside, something soft stirs. Not loudly. Not clearly. Just a faint awareness of the world beyond structure. A feeling that cannot be fully expressed. And then, as always, the moment passes. The child returns indoors. The warmth of the house feels stronger now. The contrast more noticeable. And once again, this becomes a small, quiet comfort. Afternoon comes. But the light fades quickly. There is less time for activity. More time for stillness. Lessons may end sooner. Leaving space that is not filled with noise or excitement, but with quiet presence. The child sits, reads, or simply remains still, looking out the window, watching the faint movement of light as it fades into evening. This quiet time becomes something familiar. Not empty, but full in a quiet way. A space where the child exists without instruction, without correction, without expectation pressing as strongly. And in this space, the inner world becomes clearer. Thoughts move gently. Feelings rise softly. There is no need to speak them. No need to define them. They simply are. Interaction with others remains calm. Even in shared spaces, there is a sense of distance that has become natural. Not uncomfortable, but present. Each person within their own quiet space, even when sitting side by side. As evening arrives, darkness settles quickly. The sky deepens into shadow. The house becomes a place of soft light and quiet corners. Dinner is served. The same careful routine. The same steady rhythm. The child sits, eats, listens, speaks only when needed. There is no variation, no sudden change. And this sameness brings a kind of peace, but also a narrowing of experience, because the world remains within known boundaries. After the meal, the house quiets almost completely. The day has ended. Night has taken its place. The child returns to their room. The door closes softly. Inside, the space feels calm, familiar, almost untouched by time. They sit for a moment, perhaps longer than before. The silence is deeper now. The outside world no longer visible. Only darkness beyond the window. And in this quiet, something within the child feels more present. A deeper awareness. Not of anything specific, but of being. Of existing within a life that is steady, predictable, and quietly distant. There is no resistance to this. No desire to change it. Only a soft acceptance. Because this is the world they have always known. Eventually, they prepare for sleep. The same careful routine. The same quiet movements. They lie down. The blankets warm. The room still. And as sleep begins to come, gently and without interruption, the child drifts once more into that private space beyond the day. A space where feeling moves more freely. Where the quiet boundaries soften. Where the self is not shaped by expectation, but simply allowed to be. And so, the cycle continues. Day after day. Season after season. A childhood that moves slowly, quietly, and with a calm, steady stillness that settles deeper with time. There comes a point, quietly and without announcement, when the rhythm of childhood begins to feel less like something new, and more like something permanent. The days continue as they always have. Morning arrives slowly. The child wakes, dresses, moves through each familiar step with calm certainty. Nothing feels uncertain now. Nothing feels unexpected. The structure of life has settled so deeply that it no longer feels like structure at all. It simply feels like the way things are. And within this steady pattern, the child begins to change in ways that are difficult to see from the outside. Not in height, not in voice, but in the quiet shaping of the inner self. As this morning begins, the light is soft and pale, spreading slowly across the room. The air carries that same gentle coolness. The walls hold the same quiet presence. The child rises without pause. There is no lingering in bed. No hesitation. Movement begins as naturally as breathing. Clothing is put on with ease. Each piece placed correctly. Each detail attended to without thought. The body remembers everything. And so does the mind. As the child steps into the hallway, there is no need to listen for what comes next. They already know. Breakfast. Lessons. The steady unfolding of the day. And so, the child moves forward without question. Breakfast passes in quiet stillness. But now, something has deepened. The silence is no longer something that surrounds the child. It is something they carry within. Even if the room were filled with sound, the child would remain calm, measured, still. Because stillness has become part of who they are. Lessons begin again. But now, there is a sense of quiet mastery. Not perfection, but familiarity so complete that very little effort is needed to remain focused. Reading flows. Writing forms smoothly. Numbers settle into place without confusion. The governess observes more than she speaks. Her role has softened. Because the child no longer needs constant guidance. And this creates a quiet distance between them. Not cold, but less connected than before. Where once there were frequent corrections and instructions, now there is space. And in that space, the child stands alone more often. Not physically, but inwardly. This is how independence forms in this world. Not through freedom, but through the quiet removal of guidance. The child learns to exist within the structure without being actively held within it. Outside, the day remains calm. The sky pale. The air still. There is a sense that nothing urgent exists beyond the walls of the home. And this sense carries inward. Time feels wide. Open. Yet contained within the same repeating shape. As midday approaches, the child pauses again. Not because they are told to, but because stillness has become something they naturally return to. They may sit by the window, looking out at a world that moves slowly. Perhaps someone passes in the distance. A figure walking quietly along the street. Then gone again. The child watches. Not with curiosity alone, but with a kind of quiet distance. As if observing something separate from their own life. This feeling is gentle. Not isolating, but noticeable. A sense that their world is contained, defined, and everything beyond it exists at a quiet remove. As afternoon continues, small tasks are completed as always. But now, they are done with a sense of ease. There is no need to think about each step. No need to question what is correct. The child simply knows. And in this knowing, something settles more deeply. A calm confidence. But one that remains unspoken. Unshown. Because even confidence, here, is quiet. Interaction with others continues. But it remains measured. gentle, voices soft, expressions controlled. There are no sudden bursts of emotion, no loud declarations. Even joy moves carefully. Even sadness, if it comes, remains contained. And so, the emotional world of the child becomes something deeply internal. Not absent, but hidden. Not lacking, but restrained. This is the quiet emotional coldness of Victorian childhood. Not a lack of feeling, but a lack of expression. A life where the inner world grows rich and complex, but remains largely unseen. As evening approaches, the familiar pattern returns once more. Dinner, stillness, soft conversation. But now, the child feels fully part of this rhythm. No longer learning it, no longer adjusting to it, but living within it completely. The structure has become identity, and identity has become quiet. After the meal, the house settles into night. The light dims. The air grows still. Each room holds its own quiet space. The child returns to their room, closing the door gently. Inside, everything is unchanged. But the child is not exactly the same. They move with quiet certainty, sit with quiet awareness, and for a moment, they pause. Not because they must, but because something within them has learned to value stillness. Their thoughts are calm, not busy, not searching, just present. There is a sense of peace here, but also a sense of distance. A quiet separation between what is felt and what is shown. This separation has grown slowly, day by day, lesson by lesson, moment by moment, until it has become natural, almost invisible. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The same careful routine, the same quiet movements. They lie down, the bed familiar, the room still. And as sleep begins to come, gently and without resistance, the boundaries of the day begin to fade. Once again, the child drifts into that private space. A place where structure loosens, where feeling moves more freely, where the quiet restraint of the day softens into something gentler. And in that space, something important remains. A reminder that beneath the calm, beneath the discipline, beneath the quiet distance, there is still a full and living inner world. Soft, unspoken, but always there. And so, the long, quiet journey of Victorian childhood continues, shaping not just behavior, but the very way a person learns to feel, to hold those feelings, and to carry them silently through the steady passage of time. There is a quiet moment, somewhere within these passing days, when childhood begins to feel longer than it is. Not longer in years, but longer in feeling. The days stretch gently, repeating in such a steady way that time itself seems to soften. There are no sharp edges, no sudden turns. Only a continuous flow of mornings and evenings, each one carrying the same quiet weight. For the Victorian child, this creates a sense of stillness that reaches deep into the heart. As another morning begins, the child wakes with the same calm awareness. There is no confusion, no need to adjust to the day. The rhythm is already known before the eyes fully open. The room is dim, the light slow to arrive. The air feels cool, resting lightly against the skin. The child rises, dresses, moves through each action without thought. Everything is familiar. Everything is certain. And within this certainty, something subtle has taken root. A feeling that the world will continue exactly as it is. That nothing will shift suddenly. That life will remain within these quiet boundaries. Breakfast comes. The table is the same. The food is the same. The silence is the same. But now, the child no longer notices these things as separate parts of the day. They have blended together, forming a single, continuous experience. Eating is simply something that happens. Like breathing. Like waking. Like sleeping. Lessons follow. The learning room holds its steady shape. Books rest where they always have. The desk waits. The chair receives the child once more. Reading begins. Writing follows. Arithmetic continues. But now, there is almost no resistance at all. Not even the small wandering thoughts that once appeared. The mind has settled fully into the rhythm. Focus comes easily. Naturally. The governess speaks very little. Her presence is quiet, almost distant. She observes more than she guides. And in this observation, there is a quiet understanding. The child has learned what was expected. And now, they simply continue. This is the stage where discipline becomes complete. Not something applied from the outside, but something lived from within. Outside, the world continues its slow movement. The sky remains pale. The air still. There are no sudden changes. No unexpected sounds. Everything feels distant. Muted. As if wrapped in a soft layer of quiet. The child notices this, but only faintly. Because their attention has turned inward. Toward the steady rhythm of their own life. As midday arrives, there is once again a pause. But now, this pause feels longer. Not because time has changed. But because the child has grown more comfortable within stillness. They do not seek activity. They do not feel the need to fill the space. Instead, they sit. Perhaps by the window. Looking out without really focusing on anything in particular. The world outside moves slowly. A distant figure passes. A faint motion in the air. But these things feel far away. Separate. The child remains where they are. Still. Calm. Contained. And in this stillness, there is a deeper awareness. Not of specific thoughts, but of existence itself. A quiet sense of being. Of time passing gently. Of life continuing without interruption. This awareness is not heavy. Not overwhelming. It is soft. Almost like a background presence. Something that is always there, but rarely noticed directly. As afternoon continues, tasks are completed as they always are. Carefully. Correctly. Without hesitation. The child no longer questions what to do. They simply do it. This creates a sense of quiet efficiency. A calm movement through the day. Nothing wasted. Nothing rushed. Everything in its place. Interaction with others remains unchanged. Soft voices. Measured expressions. There is connection. But it is not openly expressed. It exists in shared presence rather than shared emotion. And over time, this becomes normal. Natural. The child does not feel that anything is missing. Because they have never known anything different. As evening approaches, the light fades once more. The sky dims slowly. The house becomes a place of soft shadows and warm lamps. Dinner is served. The same routine. The same calm. But now, the child feels fully settled within it. There is no sense of learning or adjusting. Only living. Quietly. Steadily. After the meal, the house grows still. Night arrives gently. The child returns to their room. The familiar space welcomes them again. Nothing has changed. And yet, something always changes. In small, almost invisible ways. They sit for a moment. Longer than before. Not out of need. But because stillness has become something they naturally return to. Their thoughts are quiet. Their feelings soft. There is no urgency. No desire to move or speak. Just a calm presence. A steady awareness. This is the quiet depth of Victorian childhood. A life where the outer world remains controlled. And the inner world grows quietly, beneath the surface. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The same gentle routine. The same careful movements. They lie down. The bed familiar. The room still. And as sleep comes once more, soft and unbroken, the child drifts into that private space where structure fades. Where the boundaries loosen. Where feeling is no longer held so tightly. And in that space, something important continues to exist. A quiet, steady self. Unshaped by rules. Unbound by expectation. Soft. Calm. Whole. And so, even as the days remain the same. Even as the world stays quiet and controlled. There is always this hidden place within the child. A place where something warmer lives. Something freer. Something that waits patiently beneath the surface of a long, quiet, and emotionally restrained childhood. There is a gentle deepening now. Not something that can be seen from the outside, and not something the child would name or even fully understand. But it is there, quietly forming, like a shadow that grows longer as the day slowly moves toward evening. Childhood continues. The same mornings. The same soft beginnings. The same careful unfolding of hours. But within this sameness, the child's inner world becomes more defined. More settled. More still. As another day begins, the child wakes without resistance. The moment between sleep and waking is smooth, almost unnoticeable. There is no sharp line between dreaming and being awake. Only a gentle shift. The room appears slowly. The faint light returns. The air feels familiar. Everything is as it should be. The child rises. Dresses. Moves forward. There is no pause to consider the day. Because the day does not need to be considered. It is already known. Breakfast comes and goes, as it always does. But now, even the smallest details fade into the background. The taste of food, the sound of utensils, the quiet presence of others, these things are no longer noticed in the same way. They are simply part of the flow. Something that happens without drawing attention. And this is how repetition shapes perception. What was once observed becomes invisible. What was once felt becomes expected. And so, the child moves through these moments with a calm detachment. Not because they do not care, but because everything has become so familiar. Lessons begin again. The child sits. The book opens. Words are read. But now, the act of learning feels different. Not like something new, but like something already understood. The mind no longer reaches outward with curiosity. Instead, it settles inward with certainty. This does not mean the child has stopped thinking. But their thinking has become quieter. More contained. More focused on what is required, rather than what is imagined. The governess remains present. But her role has softened even further. She speaks only when necessary. Her corrections are rare, because the child has learned to correct themselves. And this self-correction becomes a quiet habit. A steady voice within. Always guiding. Always adjusting. Without needing to be heard aloud. Outside, the world continues its slow, quiet existence. The sky remains pale. The air still. Perhaps the faint sound of wind moves along the edges of the house. But it does not disturb the calm. Nothing disturbs the calm. As midday arrives, the child pauses again. But now, this pause is deeper. Longer. Not because they are told to rest, but because rest has become natural. They sit by the window, not watching anything in particular, just looking, just being. And in this moment, something very quiet takes shape. A sense of distance, not from the world, but from experience itself. As if everything is happening slightly away from them. Softly removed. The child is present, but also apart. This feeling is not uncomfortable. It is not painful. It is simply how things are. A gentle separation that has grown over time. Through silence. Through structure. Through the steady shaping of emotion. As afternoon continues, tasks are completed as always. But now, they are done almost without thought. The hands move. The body responds. The mind remains calm and steady. There is no questioning. No hesitation. Everything flows smoothly. And within this smoothness, the child becomes even more contained. Even more inward. Interaction with others remains soft. Measured. But now, even these interactions feel lighter. Less necessary. The child does not seek conversation. Does not seek expression. They are comfortable in silence. Comfortable in stillness. Comfortable within themselves. And so, the emotional world continues to settle. Not disappearing, but becoming quieter. More distant. More private. As evening approaches, the light fades once more. The sky darkens. The house becomes a place of gentle shadows and warm, quiet corners. Dinner is served. The same routine. The same calm. But now, it feels almost like a reflection of all the days before it. Nothing stands out. Nothing changes. Everything continues. After the meal, the house grows still. Night settles gently. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly. Inside, the space feels unchanged. But the child feels more deeply settled than ever before. They sit. Not out of habit, but out of quiet inclination. Stillness calls to them now. Not as something required, but as something natural. Their thoughts are few. Their feelings soft. There is no urgency. No movement. Just presence. This is the quiet depth of a long, structured childhood. A life where the outer world remains calm and controlled. And the inner world becomes quiet and distant. Not through force, but through time. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The routine remains the same. Unchanging. They lie down. The bed familiar. The room still. And as sleep comes once again, gently, and without interruption, the child drifts into that private space where everything softens. Where the quiet distance fades. Where feeling moves more freely. And in that space, something remains. Something untouched by routine. Untouched by expectation. A quiet warmth. A soft presence. the truest part of the self. Always there. Even in the most silent days. Even in the longest, quietest childhood. And so, the story continues. Slowly. Gently. Without change. Without urgency. A life unfolding in quiet repetition. Shaping not only what the child does, but how they exist within the stillness of their own world. Time continues to move. But now, it feels softer than ever. Less like something passing. And more like something resting. The days no longer feel separate at all. Morning does not stand apart from afternoon. Evening does not feel like an ending. Everything blends into a single, quiet flow that carries the child forward without effort. There is no sense of rushing toward anything. No feeling of waiting for something to arrive. Only the steady presence of what already is. As another morning begins, the child wakes in that same gentle way. There is no sharp return from sleep. No sudden awareness. Just a slow opening of the eyes. A soft recognition of the room. The same walls. The same still air. The same quiet light. Nothing has changed. And yet, something has deepened. The child rises. Moves through the familiar motions. Dressing now happens almost without awareness. The hands move. The fabric settles. Everything falls into place. There is no thought needed. No decision required. This is how routine becomes something beyond habit. Something that exists beneath thought itself. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels unchanged. But the child's experience of it has grown quieter. Even the smallest sounds seem distant now. Footsteps. The faint movement of doors. The soft presence of others. All of it blends into the background. Breakfast passes. The same careful posture. The same silent rhythm. But now, the act of eating feels almost invisible. It happens, but it is not noticed in detail. Because attention has shifted inward. Toward a quieter, more distant place. Lessons begin again. The child sits at the desk. The book opens. But something has changed here as well. Not in the lesson, but in the feeling of it. There is no sense of effort. No sense of learning something new. Everything feels already known. Already settled. The child reads. But the words pass through gently, without resistance. Writing follows. But the pen moves almost automatically. Each letter forms without pause. Each line completes itself. The governess is present. But she feels further away now. Not physically, but in the way the child experiences her. Her voice, when it comes, is soft. Almost distant. Because the child no longer depends on it. Guidance has become internal. Correction has become silent. And so, the space between them grows. Not in discomfort, but in quiet independence. Outside, the world remains still. Perhaps there is a faint movement of wind. Perhaps a distant sound passes briefly through the air. But nothing lingers. Nothing interrupts the calm. And this calm settles deeply within the child. Becoming not just a part of their environment, but a part of their being. As midday arrives, the child pauses once more. But now, the pause feels like the natural state. Not a break from activity, but a return to stillness. They sit by the window, looking out, but not focusing. The world beyond the glass feels far away. Not unreachable, but separate, as if it exists in a different layer of time. The child remains where they are. Still. Calm. And within this stillness, something becomes very clear. A quiet emotional distance. Not sadness. Not emptiness. But a gentle separation from feeling as something to be expressed. Emotions still exist. But they move softly. Without urgency. Without the need to be shared. They rise. And settle again. Like breath. Like the slow movement of light across the room. This is the quiet heart of Victorian childhood. A life where feeling is not absent, but deeply contained. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks as always. But now, everything feels effortless. The body responds. The mind remains calm. There is no resistance. No questioning. Just a smooth flow of action. Interaction with others becomes even more subtle. Fewer words. Less need for exchange. Presence alone is enough. The child sits beside others, but remains within their own quiet space. And this becomes normal. Comfortable. Even preferred. As evening approaches, the light fades again. The sky dims slowly. The house becomes softer. Quieter. Dinner comes. But now, it feels like an echo of all the dinners before it. Nothing stands out. Nothing calls attention. Everything simply continues. After the meal, the house settles quickly into night. The child returns to their room. The familiar space feels almost unchanged from the very beginning. But the child has changed. Deeply. Quietly. They sit for a moment. Longer than ever before. Not because they need to, but because stillness has become their natural state. Their thoughts are few. Their feelings soft. There is no urgency. No desire to move. Just a calm presence. A quiet awareness. This is where the long, quiet nature of childhood becomes most clear. Not in the actions of the day, but in the stillness that fills the spaces between them. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The routine unchanged. Always the same. They lie down. The bed familiar. The room still. And as sleep comes once more, gently and without interruption, the child drifts into that private place beyond structure. A place where the quiet distance softens. Where feeling moves more freely. Where the self is not held within careful boundaries. And in that place, something remains. Something untouched. A quiet warmth. A gentle presence. A reminder that beneath the long, quiet stillness of their days, there is always something more. Something soft. Something human. Something that waits patiently beneath the surface of a childhood that is calm, controlled, and deeply, quietly distant. There is a softness now to everything. Not just in the light, or the air, or the quiet rhythm of the house, but in the way the child moves through the world. Each action feels lighter, more effortless, as if the weight of learning and adjusting has slowly faded away. What remains is something steady. Something calm. Something deeply settled. As another morning begins, the child wakes without even the brief pause that once existed. There is no moment of listening, no quiet gathering of awareness. Waking and being awake feel almost the same. The room is already known. The air already familiar. The day already understood. And so, the child rises. Not as a beginning, but as a continuation. Dressing happens without thought. The hands move. The clothing falls into place. Each small detail correct, without effort. The body remembers everything. And the mind no longer needs to guide it. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels almost silent. Not because there is no sound, but because the child no longer notices it in the same way. Everything blends together. Soft footsteps, distant movement, the quiet presence of others. All of it becomes part of a background that no longer asks for attention. Breakfast comes and goes. But now, it feels almost invisible. The act of eating is no longer something separate from the flow of the day. It is simply part of it. The child sits, eats, rises. All without pause. All without thought. And then, as always, lessons begin. But something has changed here in a deeper way. The child no longer feels like a student. There is no sense of learning. No sense of effort. The book opens. Words are read. But they pass through gently, without resistance. Writing follows. The pen moves. Lines form. But the mind remains still. Everything is already known. Already settled. The governess is present. But her presence feels distant now. Not because she has moved away. But because the child no longer depends on her. Her voice, when it comes, is soft. Almost like an echo. Something heard, but not needed. Guidance has become internal. Correction has become silent. And so, the child exists within the structure without feeling held by it. This is a quiet kind of independence. Not freedom in the way we might imagine, but a complete merging with the rhythm of life. Outside, the world remains unchanged. The sky pale. The air still. Perhaps a faint movement of wind touches the edges of the day. But it does not disturb anything. Nothing disturbs the calm. And this calm now feels complete. As midday arrives, the child pauses. But now, the pause feels endless. Not in length, but in depth. They sit by the window, looking out, but not seeing anything in particular. The world beyond the glass feels very far away. Not separate in distance, but separate in feeling. As if it belongs to a different kind of life. A life with more movement, more variation, more sound. But here, inside this quiet rhythm, everything remains still. And the child has become part of that stillness. Deeply. Completely. This is where the emotional distance becomes most clear. Not as something forced. Not as something painful. But as something natural. The child does not reach outward for expression. Does not feel the need to share every thought. Every feeling. Instead, everything remains inside. Soft. Contained. Steady. This is not emptiness. It is quiet fullness. A world of feeling that does not need to be spoken to exist. As afternoon continues, tasks are completed without thought. The body moves. The hands respond. Everything flows smoothly. There is no interruption. No hesitation. No resistance. Interaction with others becomes even more subtle. Fewer words. Less exchange. Presence alone is enough. The child sits beside others, but remains within their own quiet space. And this space feels complete. Sufficient. There is no longing for something more. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening approaches, the light fades once more. The sky dims. The house grows softer. More enclosed. Dinner comes. But now, it feels like a continuation of every dinner before it. No variation. No change. Just the steady rhythm of life repeating itself. After the meal, the house settles into silence. Night arrives gently. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly. Inside, everything is as it has always been. The same bed. The same chair. The same quiet air. But now, the room feels like an extension of the child's inner world. Still. Calm. Unchanging. They sit. Not out of habit. But because there is nowhere else to go. Not physically. But emotionally. Stillness is no longer something they enter. It is something they are. Their thoughts are quiet. Their feelings soft. There is no urgency. No movement. Just presence. This is the quiet depth of a long, controlled childhood. A life where the outer world remains steady. And the inner world becomes silent and distant. Not through loss, but through gentle shaping over time. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The same routine. The same careful movements. They lie down. The bed familiar. The room still. And as sleep comes once more, gently and without interruption, something shifts again. Not in the day, but in the feeling of the night. Because now, the space beyond waking feels even more important. Even more open. A place where the quiet boundaries dissolve completely. Where feeling moves freely. Where the self is no longer shaped by expectation at all. And in that space, something remains. Something unchanged. A quiet warmth. A gentle presence. A reminder that beneath the long, quiet stillness of their days, there is always something more. Something soft. Something alive. Something waiting patiently beneath the calm surface of a childhood that feels long, quiet, and deeply, quietly restrained. There is a point, very quiet and almost impossible to notice, where the child no longer feels like they are moving through childhood, but instead feels as though childhood is moving gently around them. The days continue, unchanged. Morning comes. Light returns. The same soft beginning unfolds. But now, everything feels even more distant from effort. As if life no longer requires participation in the same way. As another morning arrives, the child wakes without any sense of beginning at all. There is no moment of transition. No feeling of starting the day. Only a quiet continuation of what has always been. The room is known before it is seen. The air is familiar before it is felt. The child rises, not because they decide to, but because rising is simply what happens next. Dressing follows. Each movement smooth. Effortless. The hands move without instruction. The body completes each task without pause. There is no thought. No reflection. Only quiet action. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels softer than ever. Not silent, but distant. As if every sound has moved further away. Footsteps echo gently. Voices, if they exist, are faint. Everything feels wrapped in a layer of calm. Breakfast passes. But now, it leaves almost no impression at all. The act of eating, of sitting, of rising, it all blends into the flow so completely that it no longer feels separate. The child no longer notices the details. Because attention has turned inward fully. Lessons begin. But they no longer feel like lessons. There is no sense of being taught. No sense of learning. The book opens. The child reads. But it feels like something already known. Writing follows. But the pen moves as if guided by something beyond thought. Everything is smooth. Unbroken. The governess is there. But now, she feels almost like part of the background. Her presence steady, but no longer central. Her voice, when it comes, is soft and brief. Because there is little left to guide. The child has absorbed everything. Not just knowledge, but rhythm, expectation, stillness. And now, they live within it completely. Outside, the world continues its quiet existence. But it feels further away than ever before. The sky, the air, the distant movement of life, all of it seems to exist beyond a gentle barrier. The child is aware of it, but not connected to it in the same way. As midday arrives, the child sits by the window again. But now, the act of looking outside carries a different feeling. Not curiosity. Not even quiet observation. But a soft distance. The world beyond the glass moves, but it does not draw the child in. It remains separate. And the child remains still. Contained within their own quiet space. This is where the emotional stillness becomes most complete. Not as something learned. Not as something practiced. But as something fully lived. The child does not reach outward for expression. Does not feel the need to share or release feeling. Everything exists within. Soft. Steady. Unmoving. This is not emptiness. It is a kind of quiet fullness. But one that does not expand outward. As afternoon continues, tasks are completed without awareness. The hands move. The body responds. Everything flows. There is no interruption. No resistance. No thought. Even interaction with others feels lighter now. Words are fewer. Moments of shared presence pass without leaving a strong impression. The child exists beside others, but remains within themselves. And this feels natural. Comfortable. Complete. As evening approaches, the light fades once more. But now, even this change feels softer. Less noticeable. The shift from day to night becomes almost invisible. Dinner comes. But it feels like part of a continuous line of moments that never truly separate. There is no beginning. No end. Only flow. After the meal, the house grows still. Night settles fully. The child returns to their room. The space feels exactly as it always has. But now, it feels more deeply connected to the child's inner world. As if the room itself reflects the stillness within. They sit. But even sitting no longer feels like an action. It feels like a natural state. There is no need to move. No desire to change anything. Thoughts are quiet. Feelings are soft. Everything exists in a calm, steady balance. This is the quiet depth of a long, structured childhood. A life where movement has slowed. Where expression has softened. Where the inner world has become calm and distant. Eventually, the child prepares for sleep. The routine unchanged. Always the same. They lie down. The bed familiar. The room still. And as sleep comes once more, gently and without interruption, something becomes clear in the quiet. That beneath all the stillness, beneath all the structure, beneath the long, quiet repetition of days, there is still something alive. Something soft. Something untouched. Because in sleep, the boundaries dissolve completely. The quiet distance fades. feeling moves freely again. And in that hidden space, the child is not restrained, not shaped, not held within quiet expectation. They simply are. And that quiet, unseen part of them continues to exist. Even as the waking world remains calm, controlled, and deeply, quietly still. There is a deep quiet now. Not just in the house. Not just in the passing of days. But within the child themselves. It is a quiet that has grown slowly, over many mornings, many evenings, many small and repeated moments. It has settled gently, layer by layer, until it feels complete. Not heavy. Not empty. But full in a calm and silent way. As another day begins, the child wakes without noticing the moment of waking at all. There is no clear beginning. No shift from sleep into awareness. Only a soft continuation. The room is already there. The stillness already present. The day already unfolding. The child rises. There is no pause. No thought. Dressing happens as it always has, but now it feels almost as if the body moves on its own. Each piece of clothing falls into place without effort. Each movement is smooth and certain. There is nothing to correct. Nothing to question. Everything simply happens. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels even quieter than before. Not because there is less sound, but because sound itself no longer holds attention. It passes by gently, like wind moving through an empty space. Breakfast comes. But now, it feels like something that exists only briefly, leaving no strong memory behind. The child sits, eats, moves on. All without noticing the details. All without pause. Lessons begin. But they no longer feel like a part of the day. They feel like the background of it. The book opens. Words are read. But the mind does not engage in the same way. Everything feels already understood. Already complete. The pen moves across paper. But it feels distant. As if the action belongs more to the body than to the self. The governess is present. But her presence has faded almost entirely into the background. Her voice, when it comes, is soft. Almost like something heard from far away. There is little need for guidance. Little need for correction. The child has become fully shaped by the rhythm of life around them. And now, they exist within it effortlessly. Outside, the world continues. But it feels further away than ever before. The sky stretches above. The air moves gently. But these things seem distant. Softly separated from the child's experience. As midday arrives, the child sits by the window once more. But now, even the act of looking outside feels different. There is no observation. No reflection. Only a quiet presence. The world moves, but it does not enter the child's awareness in a strong way. It remains outside. And the child remains inside. Not just physically, but emotionally. This is where the stillness becomes complete. The child does not seek expression. Does not feel the need to release feeling. Everything exists within a calm, contained space. Emotions are there. But they move so softly that they do not disturb the surface. Like gentle ripples that never become waves. As afternoon continues, tasks are completed as always. But now, they feel almost automatic. The hands move. The body responds. There is no effort. No resistance. No thought. Even interaction with others has softened further. Words are few. Moments pass without leaving a strong impression. The child exists beside others, but remains entirely within their own quiet world. And this feels natural. It does not feel like something missing. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening approaches, the light fades once again. But now, even this change feels distant. As if it happens without being noticed. The transition from day to night becomes almost invisible. Dinner comes. But it feels like a continuation of something that never began. The same movements. The same quiet. The same steady rhythm. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles fully. The child returns to their room. Closing the door softly. Inside, the space feels unchanged. But it also feels deeply connected to the child's inner state. Still. Calm. Unmoving. They sit. But even sitting no longer feels like a choice. It feels like the natural state of being. There is no need to move. No desire to change anything. Thoughts are quiet. Feelings are soft. Everything exists in a calm, steady balance. This is the deepest point of that long, quiet childhood. A place where structure has become so complete that it no longer feels like structure at all. Only life. Still. Controlled. Silent. And yet, even here, something remains. Something beneath the stillness. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child prepares for sleep, and lies down in that familiar bed, the quiet begins to shift once more. Not in the room. Not in the world. But in the space beyond waking. As sleep comes, gently and without interruption, the boundaries begin to dissolve. The stillness softens. The distance fades. And in that quiet, hidden place, something opens again. Feeling moves more freely. Thought becomes less controlled. The self is no longer held within careful limits. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched by the long, quiet shaping of the day. A reminder that beneath the silence, beneath the calm, beneath the deep and steady stillness of this childhood, there is always something more. Something soft. Something human. Something waiting quietly. Just beyond the reach of a life lived in gentle, careful restraint. There is a quiet fullness now. Not something that grows louder, or clearer, or more defined, but something that settles so deeply that it no longer moves at all. It simply remains, steady and calm, like the air in a closed room where nothing has disturbed it for a long time. The child continues within the stillness. Day follows day. Morning returns again. But the feeling of beginning has almost disappeared completely. When the child wakes, it does not feel like waking. It feels like continuing. The room is already known. The light already understood. The air already familiar. Nothing needs to be noticed. Nothing needs to be learned. The child rises. Not with intention. Not with thought. But because movement simply follows stillness. Dressing happens as it always has. But now, even the sense of action feels faint. The hands move. The body responds. But the mind remains quiet. Detached. Everything flows without effort. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels distant in a way that is difficult to describe. Not empty. Not silent. But softened. As if every sound has been gently lowered, every movement slowed to match the calm that has settled within the child. Breakfast comes and goes. But now, it leaves almost no trace at all. There is no clear memory of sitting, of eating, of rising. Only the continuation of time. Lessons begin. But they no longer feel like lessons. There is no sense of purpose. No sense of effort. The book opens. Words pass. But they do not require attention. They are simply there. Writing follows. The pen moves. But the movement feels distant. As if it belongs to the body alone. The governess is present. But her presence has faded almost completely into the background. Her voice, when it comes, feels like something far away. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. The child has become fully aligned with the structure of life. And now, that structure exists quietly within them. Outside, the world continues. But it feels further away than ever before. The sky stretches. The air moves. But these things feel almost unreal in their distance. They exist. But they do not reach the child in a strong way. As midday arrives, the child sits by the window again. But now, even the idea of looking outside feels faint. There is no focus. No observation. Only presence. The world beyond the glass moves slowly. But it feels like something separate. Something that belongs to another rhythm. Another life. The child remains still. Contained. Quiet. This is where the emotional distance becomes complete. Not as something chosen. Not as something felt strongly. But as something that simply is. Emotion exists. But it does not rise. It does not move outward. It remains deep within, soft and still. Like something resting beneath the surface of calm water. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks without awareness. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the mind remains quiet. Still. Uninvolved. Even interaction with others feels distant. Words pass without weight. Moments pass without leaving an impression. The child exists beside others, but not fully with them. And this feels natural. There is no discomfort in it. No sense of loss. Because this has become the normal state of being. As evening approaches, the light fades once more. But now, even this fading feels almost invisible. The transition from day to night no longer stands out. It simply happens. Dinner comes. But it feels like a continuation of everything before it. No beginning. No end. Only flow. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles completely. The child returns to their room. Closing the door softly. Inside, everything is unchanged. The same bed. The same walls. The same quiet air. But now, the room feels almost identical to the child's inner world. Still. Calm. Unmoving. They sit. But even sitting does not feel like an action. It feels like the natural state. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel in any outward way. Everything exists within a quiet balance. This is the deepest point of that long, quiet childhood. A place where life has become so steady. So controlled. So calm. That it no longer feels like something separate from the self. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child prepares for sleep, and lies down in that familiar bed, the quiet begins to soften once more. Not in the room. Not in the world. but in the space beyond waking. As sleep comes, gently and without interruption, the stillness begins to shift. The boundaries fade. The distance dissolves. And in that quiet, hidden space, something opens again. Feeling moves more freely. Thought becomes less contained. The self is no longer held within careful limits. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched. A quiet reminder that beneath the calm, beneath the silence, beneath the long, steady stillness of this childhood, there is always something more. Something soft. Something human. Something waiting patiently. Within a world that has taught the child to live quietly. To feel quietly. And to carry everything within a calm, unspoken stillness. There is a quiet stretching of time now. Not forward, not backward, but outward. As if each day gently expands, becoming wider rather than longer. The hours do not feel separate anymore. They feel like a single, unbroken space where everything exists at once: morning, afternoon, evening blended into a calm and steady presence. The child moves within this space without effort. Without resistance. Without even noticing the movement itself. As another morning arrives, there is no sense of waking at all. Only awareness. The room is already there. The light already resting softly against the walls. The air still and familiar. The child opens their eyes, but it does not feel like a beginning. It feels like a continuation of something that never paused. They rise. Not with intention. Not with thought. But because rising simply happens. Dressing follows, as always. But now, even the smallest actions feel distant. The hands move. The fabric settles. But the mind remains still. Detached. There is no need to guide anything. Everything is already known. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels quieter than ever before. Not empty. Not silent. But softened to the point where sound no longer carries meaning. Footsteps pass. Doors open and close. But these things feel far away. Like echoes from a distant place. Breakfast comes. But it feels almost like it does not happen at all. The child sits. Eats. Rises. But there is no clear sense of these actions. They pass through time without leaving an impression. Lessons begin. But now, even the idea of learning feels distant. The book opens. Words are there. But they do not require attention. They simply exist. The child reads. Writes. Moves through the motions. But everything feels automatic. The governess is present. But her presence is almost invisible now. Her voice, when it comes, is soft and distant. Like something heard from far away. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. The child has become fully aligned with the rhythm of life. And now, that rhythm carries them forward without effort. Outside, the world continues its quiet existence. But it feels further away than ever. The sky stretches pale and wide. The air moves gently. But none of it reaches the child in a strong way. It remains separate. Distant. Almost unreal. As midday arrives, the child sits by the window once more. But now, even the idea of looking outside feels faint. There is no focus. No observation. Only presence. The world beyond the glass moves slowly. But it feels like something that belongs to another reality. The child remains still. Contained. quiet. This is where the emotional stillness becomes complete. Not as something learned, not as something chosen, but as something fully lived. Emotion exists, but it does not rise. It does not move outward. It remains deep within, soft, unmoving. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks without awareness. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the mind remains still. There is no effort, no resistance, no thought. Even interaction with others has faded into something minimal. Words are few. Moments pass without leaving a trace. The child exists beside others, but remains entirely within their own quiet world. And this feels complete. There is no sense that anything is missing, because nothing else has ever been known. As evening approaches, the light fades once more. But now, even this fading feels like part of the same continuous moment. There is no clear transition, no sense of ending. Only a gentle shift within the same quiet space. Dinner comes. But it feels like a continuation of something that never began. The same movements. The same stillness. The same calm. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles fully. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly. Inside, everything is unchanged. But now, the room feels almost identical to the child's inner state. Still, calm, endless. They sit. But sitting is no longer an action. It is simply being. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel in any outward way. Everything exists within a quiet, steady balance. This is the deepest stillness of that long, quiet childhood. A place where life has become so calm, so controlled, so unchanging, that it no longer feels separate from the self at all. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child prepares for sleep, and lies down in that familiar bed, the quiet begins to soften once more. Not in the world. Not in the room. But in the space beyond waking. As sleep comes, gently and without interruption, the stillness begins to loosen. The distance fades. The boundaries dissolve. And in that quiet, hidden place, something opens again. Feeling moves more freely. Thought becomes less contained. The self is no longer held within careful limits. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched. A quiet presence that has remained all along. Beneath the calm. Beneath the silence. Beneath the long, steady stillness of a childhood that feels endless. Quiet. And gently, deeply restrained. There is a quiet sense now that time no longer moves in the usual way. Not forward, not in clear steps, but in a soft and endless drift. The days do not begin or end as they once did. They simply continue, like a long breath that never fully leaves the body. The child exists within this breath. Not holding it. Not releasing it. Just resting inside it. As another morning arrives, there is no feeling of waking. Only a gentle awareness that has always been there. The room is present. The light is soft. The air is still. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to begin. The child opens their eyes, but even that feels like a quiet continuation rather than an action. They rise. But rising does not feel like movement. It feels like a shift within stillness. Dressing follows, as always. The hands move. The fabric settles. But there is no attention given to these actions. They pass without weight, without meaning. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels distant in a way that is almost complete. Not silent, but softened to the point where sound no longer reaches the center of awareness. Footsteps exist. Voices may pass. But they do not remain. They do not leave an impression. Breakfast comes. But now, it feels almost like a moment that does not exist at all. The child sits, eats, rises. But these actions leave no trace in memory. They are simply part of the continuous flow. Lessons begin. But they no longer feel like a part of the day. They feel like something that happens without being experienced. The book opens. Words are there. But they do not require engagement. They simply pass. Writing follows. The pen moves. But the movement feels distant. As if it belongs to something outside the self. The governess is present. But now, she feels almost entirely removed. Her voice, when it comes, is soft and far away. Like an echo that does not need to be followed. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. The child has become completely aligned with the structure of life. And now, that structure exists quietly within them. Outside, the world continues. But it feels more distant than ever before. The sky stretches above. The air moves gently. But these things feel separate. Almost unreal. As if they belong to something beyond reach. As midday arrives, the child sits by the window once more. But now, even the idea of looking feels unnecessary. There is no observation. No curiosity. Only presence. The world beyond the glass moves. But it feels like something that exists outside of time. Outside of experience. The child remains still. Contained. Quiet. This is where emotional distance becomes complete. Not as something felt strongly. Not as something chosen. But as something that simply is. Emotion exists. But it does not rise. It does not move. It rests quietly beneath the surface of awareness. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks without awareness. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the mind remains still. Uninvolved. There is no effort. No resistance. No sense of doing. Even interaction with others has faded almost entirely. Words pass. Moments pass. But they do not connect. The child exists beside others, but not with them. And this feels natural. Complete. There is no sense of absence. No feeling that anything is missing. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening approaches, the light fades once more. But now, the fading feels like part of the same endless moment. There is no transition. No change. Only a soft deepening of the same quiet space. Dinner comes. But it feels like something that has always been happening. The same movements. The same stillness. The same calm. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles fully. The child returns to their room. Closing the door softly. Inside, everything is unchanged. The same bed. The same walls. The same quiet air. But now, the room feels like an extension of something endless. Still. Calm. Without boundary. They sit. But sitting is no longer an action. It is simply being. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel in any outward way. Everything exists in a quiet, steady stillness that does not change. This is the deepest point of that long, quiet childhood. A place where life has become so calm, so controlled, so unchanging, that it feels almost outside of time itself. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child prepares for sleep, and lies down in that familiar bed, something soft begins to shift again. Not in the room. Not in the world. But in the quiet space beyond waking. As sleep comes, gently and without interruption, the stillness begins to open. The distance fades. The boundaries dissolve. And in that hidden place, something returns. Feeling moves more freely. Thought becomes less contained. The self is no longer held within quiet restraint. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched. A quiet presence that has remained through every silent day. Through every calm moment. Through every layer of stillness. Waiting. Patient. Soft. And always there. Beneath the surface of a childhood that feels endless. Quiet. And deeply, gently distant. There is almost no movement left now. Not in the way the child experiences the world. Everything has become so still, so steady, that even the passing of time feels like something imagined rather than real. The days do not arrive. They do not leave. They simply remain. And the child remains within them. As another morning exists because it no longer feels like it begins, the child opens their eyes without any sense of change. There is no transition. No shift from sleep into waking. Only awareness that continues without interruption. The room is present. The light rests softly against the walls. The air is still. Nothing asks to be noticed. Nothing asks to be understood. The child rises. But rising feels no different from lying still. It is simply another position within the same quiet existence. Dressing happens. The hands move. The clothing settles. But there is no sense of action. No sense of doing. Only quiet continuation. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels like a distant shape rather than a place filled with life. Not empty. Not silent. But far away. As if every sound, every movement, exists somewhere just beyond reach. Breakfast comes. But now, it leaves no trace at all. The child sits. Eats. Rises. But these moments do not remain in memory. They pass through awareness like light through glass. Lessons begin. But they no longer feel like part of experience. The book opens. Words are there. But they do not ask for attention. They do not require effort. They simply exist. The child reads. Writes. Moves through the motions. But everything feels distant. Almost separate from the self. The governess is present. But now, she feels almost entirely absent. Her voice, if it comes, is faint. Barely noticeable. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. The child has become completely shaped by the rhythm of life. And now, that rhythm continues on its own. Outside, the world continues. But it feels as though it belongs to something else entirely. The sky stretches. The air moves. But these things feel unreal. Distant. Like something seen in a dream that fades upon waking. As midday exists, the child sits by the window. But there is no looking. No observing. Only stillness. The world beyond the glass moves, but it does not enter awareness in any meaningful way. It exists. But it does not connect. The child remains where they are. Quiet. Contained. Still. This is where the emotional stillness reaches its deepest point. Not absence. Not emptiness. But a complete quieting. Emotion exists somewhere beneath the surface. But it does not rise. It does not move. It rests. Unseen. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks without awareness. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the self feels distant from it all. There is no effort. No resistance. No sense of doing. Even interaction with others has faded into something almost imperceptible. Words pass. But they do not remain. Moments happen. But they do not connect. The child exists beside others, but not within the same space of experience. And this feels natural. Complete. There is no sense that anything is missing. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening comes, the light fades. But even this fading feels like part of the same endless stillness. There is no change. No transition. Only a soft deepening of quiet. Dinner comes. But it feels like something that has always been happening. The same movements. The same calm. The same absence of change. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles. But night feels no different from day. Everything remains the same. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly. Inside, the space feels endless. Still. Calm. Without boundary. They sit. But sitting is no longer something that happens. It is simply being. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel outwardly. Everything exists within a quiet balance that does not shift. This is the deepest stillness of that long, quiet childhood. A place where life has become so calm. So controlled. So unchanging. That it feels almost outside of existence itself. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never been lost. Because as the child lies down, and sleep begins to come, gently and without interruption, something soft begins to open again. Not in the room. Not in the world. But in the quiet space beyond waking. As sleep takes hold, the stillness loosens. The distance fades. The boundaries dissolve. And in that hidden place, something returns. Feeling moves again. Softly. Freely. Without restraint. The self is no longer held within quiet control. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched by the long, quiet shaping of the day. A quiet presence that has remained through every silent moment. Through every calm hour. Through every layer of stillness. Waiting. Patient. Soft. And always there. Beneath the surface of a childhood that has become so still. So quiet. So gently distant. That only in dreams does it remember how to feel without restraint. There is a softness that remains, even after everything has grown so still. It is not easy to notice. It does not move or call for attention. But it is there, resting quietly beneath the surface of everything the child has become. The days continue, though they no longer feel like days. They do not begin. They do not end. They exist as a single, unbroken calm. And within that calm, the child continues to exist as well. As another morning comes, though it does not feel like coming, the child opens their eyes into the same quiet awareness. There is no difference between waking and sleeping now. Only a slight shift in perception. The room is present. The light rests softly in place. The air remains still. Nothing has changed. Nothing needs to change. The child rises. But rising does not feel like movement. It feels like another form of stillness. Dressing follows. The hands move. The fabric settles. But there is no awareness of these actions as separate moments. They pass without meaning. Without impression. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels distant. Not far away in space, but far away in experience. Sounds exist, but they do not reach the center of awareness. They pass by, unnoticed. Breakfast comes. But now, it feels as though it leaves no trace at all. The child sits, eats, rises. But these actions dissolve as they happen. They do not remain. They do not form memory. Lessons begin. But they no longer feel like anything at all. The book opens. Words are there. But they do not ask to be read. They do not ask for attention. They simply exist. The child moves through them. But there is no sense of learning. No sense of effort. Writing follows. The pen moves. But the movement feels distant. Detached. The governess is present. But now, her presence is almost entirely gone from the child's awareness. Her voice, if it comes, is faint. Barely noticeable. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. Everything continues on its own. Outside, the world continues as well. But it feels almost unreal now. The sky stretches. The air moves. But these things do not connect. They exist separately. As if they belong to another kind of life. As midday exists, the child sits by the window. But there is no looking. No observing. No thought. Only presence. The world beyond the glass moves slowly. But it does not enter the child's awareness in any meaningful way. The child remains still. Contained. Quiet. This is the deepest form of emotional stillness. Not emptiness. Not absence. But a complete quieting of outward expression. Emotion exists somewhere beneath the surface. But it does not rise. It does not move. It rests. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks as always. But now, these tasks feel like something happening outside the self. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the self feels distant. There is no effort. No resistance. No sense of doing. Interaction with others has almost disappeared entirely. Words pass. But they do not connect. Moments occur. But they do not remain. The child exists beside others, but not within the same experience. And this feels complete. There is no sense of absence. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening comes, the light fades. But this fading feels like nothing at all. No change. No shift. Only the same quiet presence continuing. Dinner comes. But it feels like something that has always been happening. The same calm. The same stillness. The same absence of variation. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles. But night feels no different from day. Everything remains the same. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly. Inside, the space feels endless. Still. Calm. Without edge or boundary. They sit. But sitting is no longer an action. It is simply being. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel outwardly. Everything exists in a quiet, unchanging balance. This is the final depth of that long, quiet childhood. A place where life has become so still, so controlled, so distant, that it feels almost beyond experience itself. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child lies down, and sleep begins to come once more, something soft begins to open again. Not in the room. Not in the world. But in the quiet space beyond waking. As sleep takes hold, the stillness loosens. The distance fades. The boundaries dissolve. And in that hidden place, something returns. Feeling moves again. Softly. Freely. Without restraint. The self is no longer held within quiet control. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched. A quiet presence that has remained through every silent day. Through every calm moment. Through every layer of stillness. Waiting. Patient. Soft. And always there. Beneath the surface of a childhood that has become so long. So quiet. And so gently, deeply still. That only in the quiet space of dreams does it remember the fullness of feeling. There is nothing left that feels new. And yet, nothing feels old either. Everything simply is. The child exists within a world that no longer changes in any noticeable way. Time does not pass as it once did. It does not carry moments forward. It does not leave anything behind. It simply holds everything in a quiet, endless present. As another morning comes into being, though it cannot truly be called a beginning, the child opens their eyes into the same calm awareness. There is no transition. No sense of returning. Only presence. The room is there. The light rests softly against familiar surfaces. The air is still, untouched. Nothing asks to be seen. Nothing asks to be understood. The child rises. But rising feels no different from remaining still. It is only a slight shift within the same quiet state. Dressing follows. The hands move. The clothing settles. But there is no awareness of these actions as separate events. They pass through time without form. Without weight. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels like something that exists at a distance. Not far away. But unreachable in experience. Sounds move through the space. But they do not reach the center of awareness. They fade before they are noticed. Breakfast comes. But it feels like nothing at all. The child sits. Eats. Rises. But there is no sense that these things have happened. They do not remain. They do not leave a trace. Lessons begin. But they no longer exist as something to be done. The book opens. Words are present. But they do not call for attention. They do not ask to be understood. The child moves through them without effort. Without thought. Writing follows. The pen moves. But it feels distant. As if it belongs to something outside the self entirely. The governess is present. But now, she exists almost completely beyond a child's awareness. Her voice, if it comes, is faint, like a sound heard in a dream. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. Everything continues on its own. Outside, the world remains. But it feels almost unreal. The sky stretches. The air moves. But these things do not connect. They exist separately. As if they belong to something else. Something beyond reach. As midday exists, the child sits by the window. But there is no looking. No observing. No thought. Only stillness. The world beyond the glass moves slowly. But it does not enter awareness. It remains outside. And the child remains within. Quiet. Contained. Still. This is the final quieting of emotion. Not the loss of feeling, but the absence of movement. Emotion rests beneath the surface. Soft. Unseen. Unexpressed. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks without awareness. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the self feels separate. Distant. There is no effort. No resistance. No sense of doing. Interaction with others has faded almost completely. Words pass. But they do not connect. Moments occur. But they do not remain. The child exists beside others, but not within shared experience. And this feels complete. There is no sense of absence. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening comes, the light fades. But this fading feels like nothing. No shift. No transition. Only the same quiet presence continuing without change. Dinner comes. But it feels like something that has always been happening. The same calm. The same stillness. The same absence of variation. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles. But night feels no different from day. Everything remains the same. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly. Inside, the space feels endless. Still. Calm. Without boundary. They sit. But sitting is no longer something that happens. It is simply being. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel outwardly. Everything exists within a quiet balance that does not shift. This is where childhood becomes something almost beyond experience. A place where life has become so calm, so controlled, so distant, that it feels like a quiet stillness without edges. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child lies down, and sleep begins to come, something soft begins to open again. Not in the room. Not in the world. But in the quiet space beyond waking. As sleep takes hold, the stillness loosens. The distance fades. The boundaries dissolve. And in that hidden place, something returns. Feeling moves again. Softly. Freely. Without restraint. The self is no longer held within quiet control. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched. A quiet presence that has remained through every silent moment. Through every calm day. Through every layer of stillness. Waiting. Patient. Soft. And always there. Beneath the surface of a childhood that has become so long. So quiet. And so deeply, endlessly still. there is a quiet sense now that everything has already happened. Not in memory. Not in a way the child can recall. But in feeling. As if every moment that could exist has already passed through the stillness, leaving behind only a calm and endless present. Nothing feels ahead. Nothing feels behind. Everything rests gently in place. The child remains within the stillness. Not moving through time. But resting inside it. As another morning exists, the child opens their eyes without any awareness of change. There is no waking. No beginning. Only the same quiet presence continuing. The room is there. The light is soft. The air is still. Nothing asks for attention. Nothing asks to be known. The child rises. But rising feels no different from remaining still. It is only a slight shift within the same calm space. Dressing follows. The hands move. The clothing settles. But there is no awareness of these actions as events. They pass without form. Without memory. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels distant. Not far away. But unreachable in experience. Sounds move through the space. But they do not reach awareness. They fade before they are noticed. Breakfast comes. But it feels like nothing at all. The child sits. Eats. Rises. But these moments do not remain. They do not exist as memory. They simply pass. Lessons begin. But they no longer feel like anything. The book opens. Words are present. But they do not call for attention. They do not ask to be understood. The child moves through them without effort. Without thought. Writing follows. The pen moves. But it feels distant. As if it belongs to something outside the self. The governess is present. But now, she exists almost entirely beyond awareness. Her voice, if it comes, is faint. Like something heard far away. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. Everything continues on its own. Outside, the world remains. But it feels unreal. The sky stretches. The air moves. But these things do not connect. They exist separately. As if they belong to another existence entirely. As midday exists, the child sits by the window. But there is no looking. No observing. No thought. Only stillness. The world beyond the glass moves. But it does not enter awareness. It remains outside. And the child remains within. Quiet. Contained. Still. This is where the quiet becomes complete. Not empty. Not absent. But fully settled. Emotion exists beneath the surface. But it does not rise. It does not move. It rests. Unseen. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks without awareness. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the self feels distant. Separate. There is no effort. No resistance. No sense of doing. Interaction with others has faded almost completely. Words pass. But they do not connect. Moments occur. But they do not remain. The child exists beside others, but not within shared experience. And this feels complete. There is no sense that anything is missing. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening comes, the light fades. But the fading feels like nothing. No shift. No transition. Only the same quiet presence continuing. Dinner comes. but it feels like something that has always been happening. The same calm. The same stillness. The same absence of variation. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles. But night feels no different from day. Everything remains the same. The child returns to their room, closing the door softly. Inside, the space feels endless. Still. Calm. Without boundary. They sit. But sitting is no longer something that happens. It is simply being. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel outwardly. Everything exists within a quiet balance that does not shift. This is the quiet stillness where childhood becomes something beyond time. A place where life no longer moves. No longer changes. No longer asks anything at all. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child lies down, and sleep begins to come once more, something soft begins to open again. Not in the room. Not in the world. But in the quiet space beyond waking. As sleep takes hold, the stillness loosens. The distance fades. The boundaries dissolve. And in that hidden place, something returns. Feeling moves again. Softly. Freely. Without restraint. The self is no longer held within quiet control. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched. A quiet presence that has remained through every silent day. Through every calm moment. Through every layer of stillness. Waiting. Patient. Soft. And always there. Beneath the surface of a childhood that has become so still. So quiet. And so endlessly, gently calm. There is a stillness now that feels complete. Not growing. Not deepening. But settled in its final form. The child no longer moves through the world in any way that can be clearly felt. Movement still happens, but it does not register as change. Time still passes, but it does not leave any trace behind. Everything remains. Everything continues. But nothing feels different. As another morning exists, the child opens their eyes into the same quiet awareness. There is no sense of waking. No sense of beginning. Only presence. The room is already known. The light rests gently across the same surfaces. The air is still. Nothing asks to be seen. Nothing asks to be understood. The child rises. But rising feels no different from lying still. It is only a slight shift within the same calm state. Dressing follows. The hands move. The clothing settles. But there is no awareness of these actions. They pass without meaning. Without memory. As the child steps into the hallway, the house feels distant. Not far away. But unreachable. Sounds exist, but they do not enter awareness. They fade before they are noticed. Breakfast comes. But it feels like nothing at all. The child sits. Eats. Rises. But these moments do not remain. They pass through awareness without form. Lessons begin. But they no longer exist as something to be done. The book opens. Words are present. But they do not call for attention. They do not ask to be understood. The child moves through them without effort. Without thought. Writing follows. The pen moves. But it feels distant. As if it belongs to something outside the self. The governess is present. But now, she exists almost entirely beyond awareness. Her voice, if it comes, is faint, like a sound heard far away. There is no need for guidance. No need for correction. Everything continues on its own. Outside, the world remains. But it feels unreal. The sky stretches. The air moves. But these things do not connect. They exist separately. As if they belong to something beyond experience. As midday exists, the child sits by the window. But there is no looking. No observing. No thought. Only stillness. The world beyond the glass moves. But it does not enter awareness. It remains outside. And the child remains within. Quiet. Contained. Still. This is the quiet stillness where everything has settled completely. Emotion exists beneath the surface. But it does not rise. It does not move. It rests. Soft. Unseen. As afternoon continues, the child moves through tasks without awareness. The body responds. The hands complete each action. But the self feels distant. Separate. There is no effort. No resistance. No sense of doing. Interaction with others has faded almost entirely. Words pass. But they do not connect. Moments occur. But they do not remain. The child exists beside others, but not within shared experience. And this feels complete. There is no sense of absence. Because nothing else has ever been known. As evening comes, the light fades. But this fading feels like nothing. No change. No transition. Only the same quiet presence continuing. Dinner comes. But it feels like something that has always been happening. The same calm. The same stillness. The same absence of variation. After the meal, the house becomes still. Night settles. But night feels no different from day. Everything remains the same. The child returns to their room. Closing the door softly. Inside, the space feels endless. Still. Calm. Without boundary. They sit. But sitting is no longer something that happens. It is simply being. There is no need to move. No need to think. No need to feel outwardly. Everything exists within a quiet balance that does not shift. This is the stillness where childhood becomes something almost without shape. A place where life has become so calm. So controlled. So distant. That it feels like a quiet presence without beginning or end. And yet, even here, something remains. Something that has never disappeared. Because as the child lies down, and sleep begins to come once more, something soft begins to open again. Not in the room. Not in the world. But in the quiet space beyond waking. As sleep takes hold, the stillness loosens. The distance fades. The boundaries dissolve. And in that hidden place, something returns. Feeling moves again. Softly. Freely. Without restraint. The self is no longer held within quiet control. And in that space, something warm continues to exist. Something alive. Something untouched. A quiet presence that has remained through every silent moment. Through every calm day. Through every layer of stillness. Waiting. Patient. Soft. And always there. Beneath the surface of a childhood that has become so long. So quiet. And so deeply, endlessly still. And now, very gently, the stillness begins to soften. Not in a way that breaks it. Not in a way that changes it suddenly. But in the smallest, quietest way. Like the air just before evening fully settles. The child lies in bed. The room is the same. The walls unchanged. The air still and familiar. Everything that has always been there, remains. And yet, something feels slightly different. Not outside. Not in the world. But somewhere deep within. The long, quiet days have passed, one into another, without edges. They have shaped the child slowly, carefully, without force. Each moment, each silence, each small repeated action has left its mark not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. The stillness that once surrounded the child has become something they carry. A quiet way of being. A calm presence. A soft distance. And now, resting here in the dim light of night, that stillness no longer feels endless. It feels complete. The child does not think about this. Does not name it. But something inside them has reached a quiet understanding. That this way of life, this slow, controlled, silent rhythm, has shaped not only what they do, but who they are. Their movements are calm. Their voice is soft. Their feelings, though present, move gently beneath the surface. Nothing rises too quickly. Nothing spills outward. Everything remains held, contained, quiet. This is the inheritance of that long, quiet childhood. Not absence of feeling, but a way of holding feeling. Not emptiness, but stillness. And yet, even now, as the child rests in the quiet of their room, something else can be felt. Very faint. Very soft. Like a distant warmth. It is not something new. It has always been there. Hidden beneath the structure. Beneath the calm repetition of days. Beneath the careful control of voice and motion. It is the part of the self that was never fully shaped. Never fully quieted. The part that moves freely in dreams. The part that feels without restraint in those hidden hours of sleep. And now, as night deepens, that part begins to rise once more. Not strongly. Not suddenly. But gently. Like a breath that has been held for a very long time. And is finally allowed to release. The child's eyes grow heavier. The room fades slightly at the edges. The stillness remains. But it softens. The quiet distance begins to loosen. And in its place, something warmer begins to spread. Something softer. Something more fluid. Sleep arrives, as it always has. Gently. Without interruption. And as it does, the world of structure begins to fade. The careful rhythm of the day dissolves. The boundaries that held everything in place begin to slip away. And within that quiet, hidden space, the child is no longer still. No longer distant. No longer contained. They simply are. Free from expectation. Free from quiet restraint. Free from the long, slow shaping of the waking world. And there, in that soft and endless space, something remains. Something that has always been there. Unchanged. Unbroken. A quiet warmth. A gentle presence. A reminder that even within the most silent, most controlled childhood, there is always something alive beneath the surface. Something that cannot be fully quieted. Something that waits. Patiently. Softly. Through every long, quiet day. And so, the story does not end. It does not close. It simply settles. Like evening light fading across a quiet room. like the last soft sound before night becomes complete. The child sleeps. The house rests. The world remains still. And everything continues. Slowly. Gently. Quietly. Into the calm and endless rhythm of time.